Ready.
All right. Ready, Scott? Everybody good? Okay. I hereby call the 2,288th meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item up tonight is the Milwaukee High School Outstanding Student Achievement Award. And Carmen, if you would like to come up with Lila.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very excited about our student tonight. And as always, I'm going to read a couple comments that her teachers gave, and then I want to say a few things about Lila Muir. So I'm going to read these comments, Lila, and then I'll give them to you. And just want to say some things about you. Okay. Mr. Fell says that Lila Muir is a wonderful young woman. She has an amazing sense of humor, is always engaged in class, and tries her best at what she's doing. Lila is incredibly friendly, personable, positive, and helpful. She enters and leaves my class with the biggest smile and always makes my day. Miss Mo says that Lila is an amazing young woman, loves to help others, always has a smile on her face, and is willing to try anything that is asked of her with enthusiasm. And there's a couple more comments that I will give you, but I want to say, as your principal, Lila, I was very excited to forward your name because I've never, ever seen you sad. I always see you with a great attitude. I always see you recognizing other people, and I saw you around campus, but I remember the one day where you really had an impact on me, and that was at the lip sync contest. And we have lip syncs for every grade level, and kids perform in front of the entire student body. And Lila was involved in that. She gets involved in every activity on campus that she can get involved in. She always has a great attitude, and if she's not directly participating, she makes it a point to come up to the kids that are participating and tell them what a great job they did and really supports them. I'm going to let her talk a little bit about her future plans, because when I talked to Lila about this award, one, she was very, very excited and honored, and her fellow classmates were also very excited for her. But she also talked a lot about her future, and she has it all planned out. So I was really, really impressed with you. And I just want to thank you for being such a wonderful human being and such a great young woman.
Thank you.
So pull the microphone up so that, yeah, there you go.
Is this good?
Yep. Maybe a little bit more. There we go.
There you go.
So my future plans is after high school, I'm going to be in an adult transition program that will help me with learning how to be in the real world, and a lot of good people are going to help me learn more about how to, for example, drive and take the TriMet further than that, and a lot more that I don't know right now, but I know I will learn from my teachers and for now. And then after that, I'm hoping to go to community college, probably in North Clackamas, and I want to study and take classes to be rather a preschool teacher or a daycare provider. And it would be really, helping kids has always been part of me, and I always just love it. And I'm hoping to do that for a real long time. I don't see myself doing anything other than that. And that's all I can think of for my immediate future. Well, is that it?
They can ask you some questions.
Yeah, please questions.
Well, I'd like to ask her a few questions. Thanks for coming, Lila, and congratulations. It's nice to have you here. Is this your last year at Milwaukie High School? It is. Oh, okay. So you're okay. And what's your favorite thing at high school?
The teachers. My teachers have been throughout my middle school and high school experience really helpful, and I know for a fact if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be right here getting this amazing reward. So I think it's mainly my teachers and my friends, because I care deeply about them, and I consider them family sometimes too.
And have you been in the Milwaukie system for all of your school years, or did you just recently come?
I've been here all 4 years.
Yeah. Oh, great.
I was there when the building came down.
Yeah.
It was kind of
Yeah, sure. Well, congratulations, and thanks for being such a contributor to the student body and the excitement at the school. And I'm sure in a couple of years we'll see you teaching preschool.
Mm-hmm. Go. Is that your mom behind you?
Yes. Can you tell the resemblance?
She's awfully proud, and she's sort of making me cry. So it sounds like Principal Gelman, again, bringing just such a remarkable young lady to get this reward, and I'm just so happy to have you here, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of the important work that you're doing in your community. I mean, it really does speak a lot about you that your classmates, I think the image of you reaching out to your fellow classmates, and encouraging them to participate and to do their best is just, it's wonderful. And I thank you for doing that. And I thank Carmen for recognizing such a wonderful young lady. And thanks for joining us. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon.
Ditto. You have an absolutely beautiful smile. So thank you for gracing us with that. And my background includes a lot of community theater and that type of thing. So I noticed that you were in drama for 3 years. So were you on stage, or did you work behind the scenes, or?
I haven't been in official plays. I have been, but I was in one in 8th grade. And I've been in theater ever since 6th grade. I just always love it, and it's a great way for me to let things out and me to raise my voice more. Obviously, I have a very loud voice, and this helps a lot in theater. And I haven't done anything else being in a production, but I was in one 8th grade. It wasn't a small role, even though I think all roles in theater is important. I was in Evil Stepsister, and it was just a remake of Cinderella, but kind of modern day. It was really fun, and learned a lot. I learned a lot from that. Yeah. But I haven't been in any major things. But I'm planning on maybe going to. Sorry, I don't remember what it's called, but this happens near the end of the school year where students from our school go on stage and show talents, and nice. I can go in it to show some scenes or some just some stuff. Because I'm since it's my last year and I haven't done it yet, I just want to because it looks fun. And my theater teacher, excuse me, is very open about it. He's like, yeah, don't worry, no one will judge you too hard. And I have performed in front of large crowds before, so I still get shaky. But
good for you. But
it's still fun.
Yeah, good for you. Well, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
I love that you already know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And that you have, it's such a good fit, because having that joyful perspective on life that I can see you bring everywhere you go. And that's really a gift to share with little kids, as you probably already know, because you just, they're such sensitive little creatures, and they really respond to that beautifully. So I think you've made a really good choice about what you want to do. And I love that you're so willing to just jump in and do things, even if, or maybe especially if, you haven't done them before.
And that's just a great gift to bring to the world in general. And I'm really glad that you've been a part of Milwaukie High and been modeling that for other students, because that's really a special thing to share with other people, especially high schoolers, because it's a really hard time to just be yourself and just try things. So it's really cool that you're showing them how it's done. So thank you for being here. It was great to meet you, and I wish you all the best. I'm excited to see what the world brings you and what you bring the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Joy and kindness are in such short supply in our modern society, and particularly high school. High school's tough, you know. A lot of kids go through a lot of stuff in high school. So to have, I can totally see why you were chosen, to have somebody who just exudes that joy and that happiness and sweetness is worth everything. And you totally deserve this award. It makes all the sense in the world to me. And Kathy's right. I think you'll make an extraordinary preschool teacher. That's what the kids need. They need kind, sweet people to both to learn from, to learn to be that way, and to just because they are tender little creatures.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing you do that work. The City of Milwaukie is proud to recognize for outstanding student achievement in academics, civic engagement, and extracurricular activities at Milwaukie High School, Lila Muir. Let it be known to all that on this 19th day of March 2019, the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas and the State of Oregon, recognize this student as an excellent example of the bright future of this community and nation.
Lila's teacher is also in the back of the room.
And her little sister, it looks like.
Her little sister.
Someday we'll see you up here.
That's it. We're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Carmen.
All right. Our next item is the Vietnam Veterans Day Proclamation, and this will be presented by the American Legion Post 180, Jerry Craig.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Never sure which one that might be. Unless it's dark. I guess I get to read the proclamation this year. It's your turn last year.
Okay.
City of Milwaukie Proclamation. Whereas the people of Milwaukie and the United States continue to honor the service and sacrifice of American military personnel and their families who served during Vietnam War, and whereas the United States government has proclaimed a Vietnam Veterans Day at the end of March to coincide with the anniversary of the last day of combat operations in Vietnam, and whereas the Oregon State Legislature has designated March 30th of each year as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans, and whereas the City of Milwaukie and American Legion Post 180 are committed to honoring Vietnam veterans and their families, and whereas it is necessary to reflect on the service and sacrifice given by the men and women who served our nation in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. And being you're supposed to read that last section, I'll bypass that, okay?
Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the State of Oregon, do hereby proclaim March 30th, 2019 to be Vietnam Veterans Day in Milwaukie.
Outstanding. Good job. To give you a little update from last year, as you know, we're still pretty active in all the services. As a all services chaplain, I get to meet all the services families and and help them, whether it be Agent Orange or just working with the VA or whatever. I've actually became more committed to Clackamas County Social Services in regards to veterans, and I'm on their homeless and suicide committees, which are getting larger and larger. The one thing I'd like to say is that there's more Vietnam veterans groups forming outside the Legions and VFWs now. For instance, I found a new one in Happy Valley at the New Seasons. They meet every Thursday. River Shores Motel and Restaurant, there's now 50 that show up first Friday at 8 o'clock, and they stay till about noon. So, in the 1st Cav, 1st Division, and 25th ID, Infantry Division, and Vets 4 out of St. Helens and Scappoose show up here to meet with the other groups. So there's constant flow. So you've got about 250 people that come in here and out of Milwaukie because of that. And because of circumstances, they all kind of meet at the Bomber. So I keep telling everybody that's my second office if you want to see me. The significant thing as to veterans, you know, we used to say that we have 22 veterans a day commit suicide. That, as of the 1st of this year, is up to 27. In 2016, we had 321 active duty folks of all services commit suicide for whatever reasons. 70% of those were all by guns. Those are the negatives. As of this year, starting January, the count's already at 1170. So that's why Clackamas County and everybody in the VA has, you'll see it on the TVs now and that stuff, the phone number for calling. The biggest thing is recognizing who's in trouble and how to prevent that. And all veterans, whatever service they're in, we're always looking in the question we always ask, do you need help? From there, we find out. So that's constantly a thing that is of concern, would be concern to you because it affects other families and whatever. We're hoping to make that work. The other thing is, I need to mention is in this proclamation, not that Scotty's ever wrong, National Vietnam Veterans Day is now considered and proclaimed as a national holiday. And the welcome home has kind of waned, but we as veterans meet each other, find out who each other are, and say welcome home as Vietnam veterans. Iraq and Afghanistan is the big group that's now coming, and we're even having a lot of members from those eras, using that word loosely, actually coming down to the Legion to see what we're about and joining and asking for help. So to me, that's a significant increase. As you know, as a chaplain, I do a lot of services at Willamette National, and on the 4th Thursday, which I think some of you other than have heard, where we give full military honors to all the veterans who are, their caskets and stuff come to Willamette National, and they list them, and on that Thursday, we actually give them full military honors, because when they leave their hometown, sometimes they don't have that. But where we used to see a lot of World War II veterans passing, Vietnam veterans are almost equal to that count. And most of the Vietnam veterans, 1/3 of them actually were in the Korean War and in the Vietnam War. So it's ongoing activity. I am open to any questions.
I don't know that I have a question, but I just wanted to mention to you, Jerry, and I think I had an email exchange with you a month or two ago, but I am getting a group of people together to talk about fireworks and the impacts of fireworks on people, veterans, as well as on animals, and other people with, PTSD. So that meeting is next Tuesday night at the Public Safety Building. I will send you an email. You don't have to write it down. I'll send you an email. Patty J has been involved in that, and she's been trying to get the word out to veterans, but if you can help do that, that'd be great too.
That'd be good. I had an email today from 2 different sources that said they now have a test for PSTD, and they're actually finding out something to help the veterans. I'm anxious to find out more about it, but I thought it was interesting. Interesting fact. The biggest increase, talking about PSTD, is now COPD. That's a breathing, and it becomes rather serious. And there's points where I've been told by the veterans doctors that even though they're on oxygen, sometimes they have to take them off oxygen because they are now getting to where it damages the lungs rather than helps the lungs. So there's a lot of new things that happen. I try to stay up on that. I try to keep the negatives out of it, but it's very hard sometimes. And any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your continued service.
Appreciate it.
All right. On tonight's consent agenda, we have the minutes of the February 12th, 2019 study session, the February 19th, 2019 work session, the February 19th, 2019 regular session. We have a resolution acting as a local contract review board, authorizing purchase agreement with Team Schutmat, Inc. to provide shelf services at the new Leading Library. A resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for the Linwood Safe Routes to School project, a resolution approving the purchase of the TriMat remnant lot on Sparrow Street and delegating signing authority for the purchase, a resolution affirming the appointment of Carol Miller as the city's alternate representative to the Library District Advisory Board, and a resolution appointing a council member and others to the Oak Grove Lake Oswego Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Study. We're going to pull the F, the resolution appointing a council member, because we actually have to have a conversation about that and appoint somebody. Does any member of council wish to remove any other items from the?
Yes. I wish to remove item C.
Okay. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items
A, B, D, and E.
through E minus C. A, B, D, and E.
I would move that we, I would move that we approve the consent agenda items A, B, D, and E.
I'll second.
Has been moved and seconded to approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and E. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. So let's do them in order, I guess. So the resolution authorizing the intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation for the Linwood Safe Routes to School project.
The only reason I wanted to remove it was because it was such a big deal. And I think that we don't do enough, and I know that Kelly doesn't love big celebratory slaps on the back, but I'm going to put her in that spot anyway, because I know that she was really instrumental in getting us those dollars. And it's not every day that we receive $1.1 million for a Safe Routes to School project. So thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say thank you to some people who are not in the room today who were also instrumental in sort of getting us to where we are to be able to be in such a good position to win that money. I think, so much of the legwork and sort of the strategically thinking about how can we put ourselves in a really good position to make these projects, they're really big and we can't fund them all with only safe dollars, but, the moms and the dads at, Linwood Sojourner who were putting together Safe Routes to School action plans for their schools, including, just putting together swag bags for, encouraging folks to walk and bike to school. And that sort of inspired me when I was on the Public Safety Advisory Committee to really rethink, we could do this at all of our schools, and what can the city be doing to make it so that all of our schools can achieve these types of safety measures around their schools. So I just wanted to make sure that we recognized all of those people, and that this is a big deal, and I'm really, really excited about it. So
yeah, the Linwood PTO really, they were doing that before any other schools in the area, and before the PSAC was really working on the safe routes issues. So they really jump-started the whole thing.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yep. They absolutely did, and and this large pot of money is how we will fill out the whole $52 million or whatever the total project list adds up to. Often people have done that math and said, wait, what we're collecting in our safe fee doesn't get us to that. And this is that. This is how we get those pieces. And our SAFE program and our plans and the work we do at the metro level and the county level should continue to garner various awards from different pots of money for these projects as we go along. But this is the first one since we started SAFE, and so it's a big deal. All right. So
separate motion then?
Yeah.
Yes, let's do that as a motion.
So then I would move to approve the Linwood Safe Routes to School Grant Intergovernmental Agreement. Or let me read from the resolution, actually. Sorry about that.
You can just see. Right.
Yeah. Agenda. Right there.
Oh, I see. I'll move to approve a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for the Linwood Safe Routes to School project. Thanks, Lisa.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize a resolution, to pass a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for the Linwood Safe Routes to School project. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Item F, a resolution appointing a council member and others to the Oak Grove Lake Oswego Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Study. Denny, do you want to get up and talk about that for 2 minutes?
If you want me to.
Please.
Thank you. Denny Egner, Planning Director. Last December, the county contacted staff requesting that we participate in a technical advisory committee for a study of a potential pedestrian and bicycle bridge from Oak Grove to Lake Oswego. I participated in that process and those meetings, and we initially worked on consultant selection, and at the last meeting here in February, I was on vacation, and apparently there was a request at that meeting to help form a citizen advisory committee and a policy advisory committee made up of council members. And I believe that was part of the intergovernmental agreement for this project between between Metro, the funding agency, and the county. So the request came in while I was out, so I got a little bit of a late start on this. And the county is hoping to have their policy advisory committee meeting in the beginning of April, and then at that policy advisory committee meeting, the county will appoint the citizen advisory committee meeting. They asked us for a council member to serve as one of the policy committee members, and for us to recommend 4 folks for appointment to that advisory committee. I scrambled after I got back trying to put this together without really kind of thinking that maybe the council might want to weigh in on some of this. And But I think I did a good job with committee members. My initial response was to call Greg Barretts-Bowman and Matt Manili, who are both really involved in Bike Milwaukie, and they had participated on the Monroe Street Greenway project. They gave me a list of potential candidates, and one of the candidates was supposed to be someone who is from a group who isn't always represented, someone who is underrepresented. And Greg Heemer had nominated another candidate. All of the candidates that we ended up with, except for, I had ended up with 5 candidates for 4 positions. And I had one candidate who was outside the study area, and decided to essentially recommend all of those candidates that were from inside the study area for your review. And the one candidate from outside said, you know, I don't meet all the criteria. You might want to pick someone else. So he was the easy one to sort of drop. Although I haven't communicated that with him yet. Anyway, this is an exciting project. It's about a year-long project. These committees are supposed to meet approximately 3 or 4 times. The county says 3 times, but I just don't believe it. And I think it is part of the feasibility phase. And the way it's set up is if it turns out it is feasible, they'll move directly into the design phase. So pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So we have the 4 candidates for the advisory committee. We just need a counselor.
That's correct.
And the mayor's been involved in this kind of historically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
This is a project they talked about at C4 and got the funding last year, and we gave it up. Monroe.
No, this didn't have anything to do with Monroe. Monroe, we stepped back from Monroe to help the cycle track on Highway 43.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, that's right.
Through Westland.
But I remember that when they talked about this at C4. Yeah.
So
it's been surveyed and, it's been kicked around for more than a decade.
This was the highest ranking project on the Clackamas County TSP. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, by orders of magnitude, not by a few points, by orders of magnitude. And yet, it has required people continuing to keep a fire lit under that with the powers that be. So at C4, at JPAC, at MPAC, I've been one of those people. Paul Savas, strangely, has turned out to be one of those people. And we were able to get this feasibility study money. So I think it's very timely. It's going to be one of the routes, or not routes, what are we calling them? Corridors. That we're hoping to have put into consideration for the transportation bond. This is, it really changes the bicycling dynamic between the east and the west side, and actually opens up the west side to bicyclists from the east side, because otherwise you go to the Arch Bridge or you climb the cemetery. And this would be a game changer. So I think it's a regionally very significant project. I think there's opportunity to put transit on it as well, which would change the dynamic of transit in the region. So I'd be honored
to be our nominee.
Yes.
If you decide you don't have time,
I was wondering about it.
I would be interested as well.
Okay.
So maybe we should have an alternate.
All right, we'll do a designee and an alternate. That sounds good.
I have an alternate for the TAC.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Does that work for everybody? Cool.
Excellent.
Right.
Thanks.
So I'll move that we approve a resolution appointing the mayor as our representative to the Oak Grove Lake Oswego Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Study, with Councilor Heisey as our alternate, and the 4 Citizen Advisory Committee members as listed in our staff report.
I'll second.
I was going to try and pull that up, but I should have been on that earlier. Name them. But, all right. It has been moved and seconded to pass a resolution appointing the mayor as the designee.
To the group.
That just kind of screws up the whole sentence, doesn't it? A resolution appointing a council member and others to the Oak Grove Lake Oswego Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Study. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Audience participation. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community member statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out a yellow speaker registration card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, are there any follow-up reports from the March 5th, 2019 audience participation? Ms. Ober.
There is not, but there was a question during the work session from council as to the SSMP rate and why that was increased so dramatically, not dramatically, but increased. You did change the fee rate last year, and that is all solely based on the fee rate increase.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I only have 2 cards. Let's start with Charles Mays.
Okay, my name is Charles Mays, and I'm with Canby Asparagus Farm Custody Tamales. I have 5 things that I'd like to talk about, but I'm going to try to make my 5 things fast because I know I don't have that much time. First of all, I want to thank the council for hiring a full-time person for tickets out here in the parking area. So far this year, I've paid $120 in tickets, and I'm not complaining about that, and I want you to know that, okay? Second of all, I am a veteran, but I do have some concerns about being a veteran and being a minority here in the city of Milwaukee, but I will talk about that at a later time because of my time period. First of all, I'd like to let you know that this past year I advertised on a billboard out here on McLaughlin Boulevard, and I advertised on television, Channel 12 and Channel 6, I think it was, or Channel 8, one of those two. And I would like to let the city know that I had over 4,800 visitors in the city this past winter, at our restaurant. Our biggest amount of attendance that came through the restaurant was 1,800 for the month of December. So I'm patting myself on the back to let you know that I brought in people, approximately 4,800 people in the city of Milwaukee. The people came from the following cities: Washougal, The Dalles, Longview, Astoria, Lincoln City, Coos Bay, Medford, Eugene, Long Beach, Sandy, Newport, Bend, Oregon, Hood River, and Camas. That's not including all of the above, but I put down as many as I possibly could that I was thinking about. So I want you to know that I am doing a good job in promoting the city of Milwaukee everywhere, and I want you to know that as Canby Asparagus Farm, because the people in the city of Canby want to know why I'm not there. But, you know, that's here nor there. So I wanted to share those things with you. The other thing that I'd like to share with you is I think it's time for the city to think about getting some security cameras in downtown Milwaukee. I looked around and I don't see any security cameras in downtown Milwaukee. Not only in downtown Milwaukee, but I would also say at least pointing at the farmers market, because with today's terrorists that we are having, anything can happen here in Milwaukee also. So I just want to make sure that you guys are thinking about cameras, because it was funny that that big boot out there in the front of my store walked away, you know what I'm saying, without nobody seeing it. I drove around here from Scott Street to the end of the street, whatever, I can't think of the name. I don't see any security cameras on any place. I'm surprised that Tryman does not have any security cameras out here at the station, what do you call that?
Mall.
The transit mall. And I find that it's time that Milwaukee starts thinking about some security cameras. Not only that, but if we're going to have that public park open up for the public next year, I think you need some cameras out there also on the park.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Okay, so I got some more to say, but I will come back.
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening to me. Any questions by any chance about this wonderful attendance?
No, you forgot Seattle on your list. My kids come down. There you go.
But there you go. That was a good list, wasn't it?
It was.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me take your time.
Sure, thank you. All right, Charles Fiken. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, yes. Doesn't happen very often. Hi, I'm Charles Fiken. I just moved here last June. So I live up on the other side of 224. And got questions about the waterfront park. It's a nice park, but there's only 4 parking spots. And I got a ticket for parking in the wrong spot. I paid it already. And I was wondering if there's anything coming up that gives
Be sure
more
to
parking.
talk into the mic. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
there you go.
Any more parking spots? Because there's a long ways for me to come down, and I really like it because it's got a long walk along the waterfront. But there's no parking spots. There's like 4 parking spots for the general public, 22 for boats, and there's 2 for handicap. So it's kind of hard to come down and all they're full and then turn around and leave.
Yeah, so that was the part of the deal with we were partially funded by the Marine Board. And out of that funding, they required X number of boat trailer parking spots and then required that we ticket on that as well.
But there are more single car spots up top by the sewage plant.
There's 1.
No,
There's
There's
only
actually a
one.
number of
the
them.
one
there's
by the-
about 10.
Not for a single, because they're all got signs. The ones over on the
Across
side.
the bridge, so you go.
Exactly. Because I usually park on that one because I walked the whole thing and then I walked down to Spring Park and come back. And that was the day I got to take it, the first time I did that. But there's only 1 spot for parking for the park. All the other ones, and there's a handicap and then a single one. But the ones over here all have the sign for the plant, for plant parking.
I'll go walk it. We'll give you an
we'll
update, but that's not,
make
that's
an
not
announcement
supposed
at
to be
the
the way it
next.
is.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my biggest thing. There's only 4 spots, and usually they're full by the time I can get down there.
I'll go check it
Okay.
out. Thank you. Yep, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. It's just, I like the park, so.
Yeah, thank you.
We're glad.
It's an issue.
Yeah, because they've added stuff since I've been here, so. All right. Thank
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, I have another one from Ted Labby.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you tonight. My name is Ted Labby. I'm with the Urban Green Spaces Institute. And I came tonight because I just, I'm kind of overwhelmed by all the great things that are happening in Milwaukee. And I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing tonight, which is to adopt an urban forest management plan, which is a really important step for Milwaukee. And I did take some time to look at it today. It was a rather hurried look at it, but there's lots of great things in there. And I just want to sing the praises of your staff and your community participants, your tree board, and of course all of you for your leadership on urban tree conservation. Yeah, so I do a lot of work across the region on urban green space conservation, and one of the things I'm working on right now is a letter. I've been participating on the stakeholder committee for the 2019 Parks and Nature Bond. And one of the things we're trying to convince Metro is that either as part of local share or maybe in addition to local share portion of the bond, to carve out some funding support for urban forestry, because we acknowledge that there isn't a lot of money for that, and a lot of cities like yourselves are struggling with that. So I'd be very interested in talking more about that, how we do that, how we might structure that. But tomorrow we have a letter going to the counselors with about over 20 different groups across the region, many of them working at the regional scale, supporting that idea, calling for that idea, trying to push them a little bit. They've been a little bit vague with their urban transformation element of one of the 6 elements. So, yeah, and part of that is how we capitalize the investments, because it's a capital bond, how we can capitalize urban trees as infrastructure, right? The green infrastructure that they are. So anyway, that's probably way more detail than I meant to go into. But I just wanted to basically come here tonight to thank you in advance for what you're about to adopt, and just tell you how impressed I am with all that's going on in the city. And, you know, a lot of it is your leadership, Mayor Gamba, and I appreciate that. I'm very excited about the bridge. I also am participating in some stakeholder group on the Oak Grove bridge. And so anyway, yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you.
So is Milwaukie perhaps one of the signatures on your?
You know, I didn't actually reach out to any jurisdictions on the letter. It was mostly the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. But in the months ahead, during April, there will be a public engagement on the bond, and we'll have a chance to actually have those conversations with you. I've been talking to people in Gresham. There's a lot of support for that idea. I'm hoping there's a big urban forestry effort going on in Gresham that we're trying to support. They're also working with Vivek Shandas, who I understand you'll potentially be working with him as part of developing a tool set to enhance your urban forestry management. So there's a lot of great things happening beyond Portland now. We're just trying to help that and enable that to the extent we can. We're a small nonprofit, but yeah, I would welcome that opportunity to.
I think that's a great.
Talk more.
I think it's a really great idea. It hadn't even occurred to me, but because it's so dispersed, right? It's not a thing. It's not a park.
It's not. Yeah, yeah.
But it is. I mean, the value is probably at least as high as parks if we had well-forested neighborhoods.
Right.
Yeah, I would be very interested in continuing that conversation. And,
Great.
And I think there might be an opportunity to get a bunch of cities to sign on.
Okay, great. Well, I will send a copy of the letter to you, and we're going to continue to collect signatories to it even after we send it out. So. Okay. So I'll follow up.
Cool.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks for being here.
Anybody else? All right. The next item is consideration of code amendments, round 3, green buildings and height variances, file number ZA-2018-004, an ordinance continued from March 5th, 2019. The public hearing on the proposed green building and building height variances related to code amendment, boy, I'm just struggling tonight, and building height variances related code amendments, file number ZA-2018-004, continued from March 5th, 2019, is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is for the council to discuss and receive public comments on the proposed amendments to the city code. Does any member of council wish to announce an actual or potential conflict of interest?
No. No.
Nor do I. Does any member of the audience wish to make a challenge to any council member's impartiality or ability to participate in this decision? Seeing none. So, the staff report will be presented by our associate planner, Vera Colias.
And is it really only round 3?
300?
Yeah, I think that you left some zeros. You left some zeros off of that, yeah.
Oh, that's not. Okay. You can try to wing. Good. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. That's all right. I'll find it. Oh. That's okay. I put it in there. I know where it is. Okay. Vera Collis, Associate Planner. I'm here with Layla Aman, our Development Project Manager. It's my co-pilot tonight. Okay. Round 300 of the code amendments. To date, and this section was carved off from the other round two-ish of the housekeeping code amendments dealing specifically with the green building standards and with the building height variance in the downtown. To date, this process has included work session and public hearing with the Planning Commission, work sessions with you, and one public hearing on the first part of these code amendments. Notification was provided to all of the NDAs. The code commentary was posted with the 30-day notice as needed or as required, and a Measure 56 notice was sent to all properties and tenants within the downtown mixed-use zone, the general mixed-use zone, and the North Milwaukie industrial area, because those are the affected zones for the building height variance as well as the green building code standards. Okay. What we'll be discussing tonight are the green building standards as well as the building height variance. Regarding the code format for the green building code, the current code includes green building standards as height bonuses in 3 different zones, the NMU, the GMU, and the NMIA, and is described in each of those individual sections of the code. What we're proposing is to streamline the code and create one code section that has all of the green building things and then have the applicable zones point to it. That way, when we never have to come back and do code amendments again, we would be doing them in only one section of the code as opposed to multiple sections of the code. And this new language would also apply to the local approval criteria for the vertical housing development zone as well. So everyone will point to the same section. For the green building requirement, the bulk of the presentation tonight does address this portion of the revision, but the proposal is to revise the current standards to include a purpose statement, and we're proposing to amend the list of the qualifying programs, but we will get into that. And then finally, the building height variance, section 911, the proposed language reflects a council discussion that we had on February 5th to clarify under what circumstances building would, or an applicant could seek to apply for a building height variance for a development project in the downtown. All right, so for the building height, or for the green building requirement, the current code language provides a single-story height bonus for buildings that receive certification at any level of an ANSI-certified green building program, including, for example, LEED, Earth Advantage, or Green Globes. Concern has been expressed that the current standards allow for some substandard programs that don't require a high enough energy performance level. So the challenge that we are facing, we think, is to create a better standard for better performing buildings, while at the same time not creating a barrier to new development or affordable housing, given the higher cost of that type of construction. So we're trying to do all of the things under this code amendment. So the question before us is to, are we approaching, is the green building standard that we're proposing, is it the right approach for this single story bonus that we're proposing within the code? While we've been working on this, what we've done, we've conducted research on other green building requirements in Portland and in the region. We conducted interviews with architects and developers, development teams. We did engage in a couple of different conversations with the Energy Trust of Oregon as well, and we did have this discussion with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the code amendments, but they included a recommendation that council consider adding more programs to the list of applicable programs, such as Earth Advantage, Passive House, and Living Building Challenge as example programs that they raised, to make sure that there were multiple options for development teams when they were coming forward for the height bonus.
So they weren't the ones that added the enterprise and the Oregon Housing Community Service?
No, we did that. Staff did that as a recognition of some of the programs that are out there for affordable housing projects. Yeah. We heard a few things from the folks that we met with and we talked to. What we heard was that we need to balance our goals with the realities of the construction and the development market here in Milwaukie. That we need to have an awareness of the impacts and the requirements of the various federal and state subsidized affordable housing programs. We want to make sure that we're not creating a list or a program that is inconsistent or contrary with those programs. And we wanted to make sure that we were providing more options to achieve multiple objectives through a green building system. So the staff recommendation, and we're calling it option 1, but our recommendation, based on conversations and feedback from experts in the field, was to include a list of program certification options, with the exception of Green Globes, understanding and recognizing the concerns and the criticisms that we had heard. The programs were selected because they include a menu of green building objectives, as well as improved energy efficiency standards as compared to the existing code. So water use and recycling and building materials and all of those things. So all of the things that package up a green building program, including energy efficiency, of course. The approach strives to address concerns voiced by developers of market rate projects and to ensure that the city isn't creating a barrier to building any affordable housing or more housing in Milwaukie. The list includes, the program list reflects a spectrum that includes programs that are part of the low-income housing tax credit program and the home investment partnership program, and includes energy efficiency standards that best reflect, we believe, the city's aspiration to become carbon neutral. The recommended language is intended to be an incremental improvement over the base building code and the existing green building code language that we have right now. We think that it's important to recognize that certification is not a one-size-fits-all approach due to their different attributes to the applicable zones. So downtown zones, for example, may be able to garner credits, more credits than someone in central Milwaukie because of the proximity to the light rail station. So we're trying to blend or use multiple kinds of programs so that we're making sure that we are choosing programs that multiple locations and geographies can take advantage of the various program credits that they have. Because location, as I said, location certification points will be accounted for differently depending on where a site is. Please jump in at any time. Okay, great. All right. Again, the staff recommendation has this longer list of certification options. We're responding to what we think was the criticism for Green Globes. It will not negatively impact any projects that are currently in the pipeline. We recognize programs within the low-income housing tax credit program provides a range of options for every level of developer experience. These programs vary in level of expertise needed to be able to walk through these programs. So we're trying to make sure that we have a lot of different options for developers. All of them require certification. That was important to staff, that there was a certification that was provided to be able to acknowledge and ensure that compliance with the standards. Staff is not, speaking solely for myself, is not going to be able to do the certification process. We need to have a program that provides that third-party certification. And again, it's a menu, includes energy efficiency and other green building objectives like livability, health, and equity as part of the package of green building criterion and credits.
So do I understand correctly that there's not a matrix that compares these and tells us what one gives us, what one regulates or calls for and what another one calls for?
Correct.
That's crazy to me.
Shocking but true.
That is crazy to me.
Yes.
If anyone is watching, and yes. Yeah.
Several of us did a lot of research to try and prove that wrong.
Yeah.
We also, just in full transparency, looked at paying for it. It was about $10,000 for hiring a consultant who would actually come in and do the comparison work. We just didn't have the cash.
We could probably sell that thing.
We probably could, or we could at least share it with a lot of people. But the programs change so often that my guess is within a year it would be out of date.
Right, 5 minutes after it was done.
Correct.
Yeah, I wished for that matrix. Really tried.
More than you can imagine.
Yeah.
And the applicability is different depending on the building type. So mixed use versus a full multifamily. So it's a very difficult thing to measure and look at. Commercial buildings vary very differently. So
by use, it's a 5-dimensional matrix. Really.
You just kind of put our mind about all of it.
Yeah, right.
But they tried really hard.
We did.
We did. In the staff report, we outlined a couple of other options for consideration. Option 2 would require Energy Trust of Oregon Path to Net Zero or equivalent for a project, with an exception for affordable housing projects, so that they would go through the green building certification standard that they needed for that affordable housing program. And option 3 would require a green building program certification and would require a minimum energy efficiency standard above the, or better than the Oregon Energy Code. Both of those.
Who would assess that?
Well,
That's
thank
a great
you.
question.
That's a good question. So both of those options 2 and 3 would certainly result in energy efficient buildings, and potentially energy efficiency would result in lower utility bills, certainly for the tenants and so on. For option 2, projects without the, projects without affordable housing would not be required to meet any green building standards but for energy efficiency. So it sort of assumes that that's the primary green building objective is energy efficiency, and kind of ignores to some degree the remainder of the green building values that those programs have. For option 3, again, energy efficiency and other green building program goals are achieved. Project cost and complexity can increase because you have 2 different things that you're trying to meet. You have this green building certification, but you also have this base level EUI that we're probably trying to hit, and those it adds another layer, another parallel layer of work, of certification for a developer to work on.
I'd actually like to comment on that real
Sure,
fast. So
yeah.
we actually I spoke with a firm that does building envelope work specifically to try and understand why that would happen, why you would run into those 2 things. As an example, under LEED, you are calculating the payback period within their modeling. Under the EUI goal, it's a different calculation, both of which are spending. I think we spent $35,000 on our energy modeling. Is that correct?
The library.
So when you take 2 different modeling requirements and you pair them together, you're adding costs into the program as well as complexity in terms of the experts that you need in order to do those 2 different things. So that was why we ran into that problem on this front. Can you go back to number 2? I just wanted to make sure we added. Originally, in full transparency, this is kind of where we started, especially on the energy trust piece. This goes back to the Planning Commission developers, others that we met with who really wanted to have multiple options as well. They were concerned about having a single choice, and we just heard over and over and over and over again, the choice was really important, that we had multiple programs in order to make sure that a team had the right experts in place, that they had an expert. For example, if you came from out of state and you were a developer in town, you maybe wouldn't have a path to net zero expertise, and you would choose to go with something that's more like LEED, where you've had a lot of experience building that type of development in other parts of the country. Those are just the feedback loops we got, and I just wanted to make sure you knew about them.
So none of that, I mean, I'm surprised that our packet didn't have any letters from no developers commented on this package. I mean, you guys consulted, but nobody's written either to Planning Commission or to us.
No, and we sent notice and the code language to all of the people we talked to multiple times because the hearing was getting continued and so on, and every time we kept sending them everything, and no, we did not. No. We did not hear back.
So clearly not a lot of heartburn.
Yeah, and to your point, Councilor Beatty, about one of our questions on the, what's the right minimum energy efficiency to hit, right? How do we figure out what that EUI should be? That we actually have that in sort of our cons list of that chart, because what is the right number? And even from ETO's perspective and from the conversations we had with them, they established that design EUI based on the building. So we'd be trying to figure out, well, what's the building type and what are the uses and what should that EUI be? And if the council direction is to establish that EUI, and if that's the direction that you want, we can certainly do that. But we would recommend that we adopt the recommendation with the understanding that we will work towards that as we're working on the climate action plan. And so that we would certainly do that. But that's a whole nother level of review and research that we would need to do to make sure that we're establishing that correctly, that we're not creating a code that no one can work with and no one can administer because we haven't done it properly.
There was also some concern about the EUI number being set at the wrong level and changing over time. So we had talked about having Energy Trust of Oregon actually run a program that would allow us to not be in the middle of that, so that as the requirements changed over time, we'd be able to just hand it off and receive a certification level. If we were to go down something like this, that program would probably be the easiest way for us to solve that problem, though it is going to add cost. So just everybody's clear.
Do we know what the EUI level is for Oregon Energy Code for different types of buildings? Is there a standard calculation?
Yeah, ETO has their calculations right now, and we did a lot of comparative numbers that we can show you. But the short answer is that for every building type, it's different, and it's based on the year that you're certifying it, so that you are always getting towards that Architecture 2030 goal. They base it on those calculations. It also should be noted that there was one program we looked at, which was the Portland program for their larger scale development versus ours. We were actually talking about EUIs and percentages of code that were different in that calculation. So Oregon's energy code is actually more stringent. So it's harder to beat their code than it is to beat the national standard, which Portland's code was based on. So it's just something else to note as we were looking at all the calculations and how everybody sort of looks at these numbers. It's why you get little shifts in percentages. It's really dependent on what your current climate is, i.e. your calculation for the climate that you reside in, as well as the national numbers, and then your building code on top of that. So it shifts things a couple of points.
That's part of the problem with all of this, is that both our state system and the national system are constantly, every 3 years, theoretically,
regularly
changing and getting more stringent. So just to set an EUI, so let me say, a mixed-use building that's 5 stories tall has to hit this EUI. In 3 years, that might be below the national standard or whatever. Right. So it's really, and that's also why there's no matrix that compares all of these things.
I did reach out to the International Code Council. I have been in comments, so the people who actually design the National Energy Code, to talk to them about what's going on and how their upcoming codes are going to compare to the building standards. And the short answer is, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, she's actually really intelligent and really helpful, but it's just such a complex question that she's sort of like, how much time do you have and when can I get back to you? Because they just adopted a new energy code that's just now being considered nationally, and so she's just now figuring out how all these pieces fit together. So we have reached out to as many people as we can in order to get a sense for where we're going. But it's another reason why having a standard, whatever the standard is, be a certification that staff looks at and stamps. If we don't have a program like that, we will not be able to keep up with the changes.
So speaking of that, what I don't know is, do programs like LEED, like Passive, like any of those, do they also get tougher with time as the national or the state standard does, or do they just have their list of all the things that you can do to qualify? And
they change over time.
They do.
So we've had multiple iterations of LEED. I think that they're on version 7 or something to that effect. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. On top of that, each of the programs are, for LEED in particular, are built separately. So there's like 7 programs. You can do a neighborhoods program, you can do a schools program, you can do multifamily. Each of those programs also go through their own iterations, so they may not match up year to year, that this program's made it through the revise, but these ones haven't. So it's pretty much impossible, which is why you go with a standard, a group of people you trust, knowing that they're going to keep trying to make it better without trying to pinpoint this part of a program, because this part of a program may change the next time around. You want to be able to trust that the organizations are trying to get better. And I think that the list that we have on there between the federal standards and what we've learned are the best ones that are doing that.
And just to make sure I understood what you said a minute ago, you said that the Oregon Energy Code standards are actually higher than what Portland's requiring?
It's not that they're higher, it's that they're measuring against different numbers. So
when we looked at the program that was doing the big multi-block.
Plan development.
Development, they were using national numbers in their comparisons originally. So when they were trying to figure out what EUI you have to hit, what percentage of the building efficiency.
So their baseline EUI was based on the national average as opposed to what the Oregon Energy Code baseline EUI would be. So their percentage reduction was a different number than if you would have based it.
So what we did is we looked at what the actual numbers were, what the EUIs were coming out to be for those things, and that is where they're pretty comparable. The Oregon Neighborhoods PUD program is pretty comparable to the Energy Trust program for Path to Net Zero. They were very similar. Path was better on a couple of them and not quite as good on one of them, but in general, they're pretty comparable. Just the calculations, if you don't know what you're looking at, it's going to look like they're pushing a lot harder in Portland. They're not. It's just they're comparing it to a worse energy code.
Interesting. And
boy, howdy was it. We've learned so much. We've learned a lot on this.
And so some of that list of codes on your option 1, some of them would require energy efficiency, and some of them people could do other kinds of green building and not really address energy efficiency beyond what the building codes require.
Well, so for example, for LEED, they have some prerequisites, so there are minimums. Similarly, Enterprise Green Communities has mandatory things that you have to hit for energy efficiency. For LEED, for base LEED, not silver or anything, but just base LEED certified, their minimum is based on an Energy Star rating, which is similar to what Enterprise Green Communities is doing as well. So they're pointing to the Energy Star rating of 75 or better is their base. So what we're trying to understand is, well, how does that compare to the Oregon Energy Code?
Right, and EUIs.
And now we're back to the matrix again. But so they all have an energy efficiency portion.
They all do.
So yes.
Okay.
Oh yes, yeah, and it just depends on where you're collecting all of your points. So, but they have a minimum of a baseline energy efficiency that has to be hit as part of the program. Yeah.
As we were preparing all this, though, Layla and I had several conversations looking back at our library build, just to understand how we ended up there. And in many ways, the Energy Trust program is by far the easiest one for people to get to. And it's that way because you don't have a certification cost. All of your dollars go to hard infrastructure with the exception of your architect and your modeling, sort of those early planning dollars, but even some of those are reimbursable by Path to Net Zero. So there are, we went that way because it was the cheapest, most efficient use of our money. It was going to get us the most bang for our buck because there's also that payback period within that. It's a long payback period, but there is a cost return to the city. When we were talking to people, architects included, everyone said Path is probably going to be the place where a lot of people end up. My personal hope is that is true, because I think that you get the efficiency goals that we've talked about from council, but by having these other options on there, we at least assure that we're getting a really quality, sustainable building, even if they don't go down that literal path.
So the next portion of the presentation goes to the building height variance, but if we want, do we want to have discussion about this portion first and close this out? And then, because I think the height variance part is probably simple, since we sort of already talked about that.
Well, maybe we should reverse that then and go through that part, get it off the table. Do the
easier one first? Okay, and come back to this one? Okay. Okay. So for the building height variance, so the question, the current code, again, Bree, we have, there was some staff was hoping to clarify the building height variance question within the code. We have a separate section for building height variances in the downtown. The question that we're asking, do we want to allow buildings that don't have a housing component or are not built to the green standard to be able to exceed the maximum building height? And based on the discussion that we had on February 5th, the council disagreed with staff's interpretation or understanding of the building height variance provision, and as stated at the hearing, the intent of the variance was to allow for additional height for a building beyond the bonuses. So you needed to be taking advantage of the bonuses, and then you could submit for the variance. So the intent was not to provide maximum flexibility, as the planning department was sort of thinking about. So whether or not the height bonuses were used. So based on that discussion, the proposed language would allow for height variance for a taller building that has used the available height bonuses. So you need to start there, and then you get to go up. So this is the underlined strikeout version, because this is the version I like to read, but this is the clean version. So the type 3 building height variance is an option for buildings that exceed the maximum heights or stories allowed through the bonuses specified in the downtown section and then in section 510. So it cleans it up that you would only be able to go up or get the variance. And again, as we discussed in February, the approval criteria for the height variance, that's a really high bar. We're talking public benefits and extraordinary design and all of these things. But at the same time, we want to make sure that they're even getting to that point because they've used the height bonuses. So I just wanted to make sure that this was clear and that we had interpreted, we had heard you correctly on February 5th to make the code change. So that was that part. The easy part, I hope.
So just the first time I read it, and after the other times I read it, this didn't happen. So but I want to check in because often the first read is the only read that a lot of people will do. I interpreted it the first time to mean that if you did at least one of the bonus things, you are now eligible for a potential variance. Reading it again, I disagreed with that reading, but something about that, and maybe if I'm the only one that did that, then I'll shut up. But I just want to make sure that it's clear to people that you have to have done both to get any more. You can't just have done the housing and then apply for a variance, or you can't just have done the green building and apply for a variance. You have to have literally done both housing and...
Which means that it's either a multifamily development that has done it as a green building, or it's a mixed-use development that's done as a green building. So we would So we would never have, we would not be able to have a 6-story office building because they're only able to do the one bonus.
6-story non-green office building, yes.
Right.
Well,
they could even if, but if it was So just so that it would have to have a housing component, or lodging, I guess, but there would have to be a residential component to a building to be able to exceed the maximum height. As long as everyone.
I mean, my recollection of when we just debated all that during Moving Forward Milwaukie was we were talking about a 6th story, and so that does assume both. I don't know that I don't know that we really discussed, I don't know, I'm okay with if they only get one, probably, I mean, I guess as long as we're keeping the really high standard for it, the sort of exceptionalness standard, I guess I don't care about creating the flexibility, whether or not they're taking
both of the bonuses.
Both of the bonuses, yeah. I mean, we were we were talking about it primarily in terms of that 6th story. That was your way to get a 6th story, but, I don't know that was necessarily, just because we focused on that we meant to exclude a 4th story for a building that doesn't do any bonuses.
Yeah, 4-story office building. So, I mean, my basic thought on it is we have 2 major goals in the city that we've had for 2 years and that we're continuing to move forward with. One is climate, one is housing. They happen to come together in this very piece of code. And it feels like if we're ignoring either one, it flies in the face of our goals.
Yeah, can I ask sort of a practicality type question, Layla? And this is maybe, I mean, what are the chances that a developer actually comes in and says, I want to go for that extra story that's a really high, hard standard to meet, and I'm not going to do a fourth and fifth. I'm just going to go for the fourth floor and meet this really subjective code language that gets you to exceptional and whatever else it says.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of risk, it seems to me, and you're not including, like a housing element. Isn't there a sort of a payoff there where if only 4 floors, then it just isn't going to pencil out? So, in practical terms, are we really even going to see that, I guess?
So you're saying if you had a 3-story office building, they want to come in, do the variance. They do introduce a fair amount of risk by taking a type 3 application process, one that has a very high standard. So, I can't definitively say, but I would say as a developer, I would probably have some concerns about approaching that, but I wouldn't be able to say either way, because it just depends on how that works out in their pro forma. Because if an additional floor for an office use
would be a lot higher.
Could pencil, then I think potentially that could be explored. So I can't say either way. I think our type 3 process and the way it's outlined for the variance itself is a pretty high standard. So you'd be looking at a fairly high quality building anyway. But I really don't.
Okay.
It's a good question. I think it's a good point. I think it introduces risk. Whether or not they would choose to take that route is, I think, really dependent on the situation. Yeah. Sorry, I can't offer anything more definitive than that, but it's hard to say.
We're used to that with this topic at this point.
It's a tough
just squishy.
topic. Yeah, it really is. And I think the option that we proposed really does try to balance the best of both elements and just trying to leverage both, trying to get the best kinds of buildings that we can get, as well as ensuring that we have a clear path forward for housing, both affordable and market rate.
So I think unless you can think of a way to make it more clear, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So this is not option 1 in your memo, though.
I think this is building height variance.
This is the
Building height variance. This is we were going to finish the building height variance and then go back to the.
I know, but under building height variance, you have an option 1 and an option 2.
You do?
And it's
Option
not the
2.
same as your option 1
One
because
is
you have the
based
or
on-
do not elect to use the height bonuses.
That's the old. Isn't that the
Well,
original?
option 1 was as it was originally
That's-
drafted. So option 2 is how we've revised it based on our conversation on
Yeah.
February 5th. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that I was still tracking what we had originally advertised as the code amendment so that,
Okay.
because someone is following along, I'm sure, and I wanted to make sure that they knew we remembered what we had done, so.
So I had called you, and you sort of answered a little bit earlier, but I called you earlier today to ask you a really easy question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you able to come up with any further?
So, the Enterprise Green Communities they base their energy standards on its Energy Star, so their certification is Energy Star certification. The Oregon Housing and Community Services Green Building Path is not for new construction, it's for rehabs. So here it is, we have it in here, but it's unlikely to be,
So it wouldn't
If someone
be
were-
used in this.
if someone were going to put an additional floor.
Yeah, I think that your only thought is if somebody decided to gut a building and add all the way up. So we've talked about this building. If you decided to restore the outside, I don't know what the standard is for how much would have to be restored versus added onto, but we just talked about doing that.
So if we wanted to change this to a 4-story building, but retain
The historical attributes of the building and the exterior. She keeps telling me it's possible, but it could be a very
Anything's
terrible
possible.
example. I don't think we have many buildings in the town where that's actually going to be useful. So if you guys wanted to strip it, you can. having it in there, I don't think you lose anything, because you can't take the program unless you're actually doing that process. It is allowed for in the federal programming. That's why we had it in here, is under the affordable housing tax credits. That's one of the programs you can do. We have no heartburn if you decide to strip it. It just means that if you were doing a major rehab, we'd have to come back and talk to you. And I don't know where that major rehab would be. I'm looking at
I can't even imagine. So that's the Oregon, that's which one? Enterprise?
Oregon Housing and Community Services Green Building. I think, but to your specific question, I think kind of boiled down to how do these Energy Star ratings and so on compare to Oregon Energy Code?
So that's where I want to go next.
And that's the answer I would like as well. And we did talk to Peter, and we put some emails out to ask that very specific question, because we had understood that the Oregon Energy Code is actually quite stringent, but understanding where any of these are as compared to the Energy Code, I don't know that I can answer that question.
I would say that gets us into the realm of the matrix again, and the study that Ann mentioned, sort of comparing the different levels of energy efficiency in every single one of these programs. I think that gets us to that $10,000 study that we just frankly don't have the resources programmed for, but that level of detail is not something that that we have, and it is also based too, again, on what type of building are we talking about, what are the site conditions, how do these things all compare. So it's a far more complex and detailed look at that. So I think
I'd never heard of an Energy Star style of construction. I've always heard of Energy Star appliances and light fixtures and things like that.
An entire building.
There's actually two programs. One Natalie was just talking to me about is actually using calculation through Energy Star for our housing program that we're looking at. So for our residential program that we'll be bringing to you this summer. The second piece, when I called the Code Council in DC, they actually use Energy Star and ASHRAE as one of their standards, as how they're measuring it. So that's part of the problem, is we're still in that weird state of trying to figure out which way we're going to measure energy. And then some of the building standards are using straight up cost return on investment, just because a lot of people, when they're going for these types of buildings, are asking the question to the architect, well, how much will I save over the life of the building? And that's their primary concern. It's not the energy per se savings that they have. So it's really just three different ways of having a discussion around energy, with all the same goal, reduction in energy. But that's part of the issue. And if Natalie, did I say anything wrong on that? She can come on up.
While she's coming up, if I could, on the Energy Star piece, the City of Portland requires reporting for energy efficiency for their construction. The Lloyd District, each of those buildings that are part of the Lloyd Eco District have Energy Star ratings. So Energy Star, in fact, is a construction rating system as well. Cool. And the City of Portland is using it. Yeah.
And just for fun, I want to add in one level of complexity, which is some of the EUIs are based off of site energy, meaning how energy efficient are you at this site, depending, no matter what mix of energy you're using. Some of it is source dependent. So for example, if you're using coal, your EUI is going to be worse than if you're using renewables, but then it's site and source. So some LEED studies are actually shown to be less energy efficient for LEED buildings, which is those studies probably that you were saying, Mayor, because LEED looks at site energy efficiency versus source energy efficiency. So if you recalculate them based on what mix of energy they're using, their energy efficiency will decrease. In Oregon, since we have a relatively high renewable mix, it's going to be already higher than comparably in Virginia.
Or Utah. Which was a lot of coal.
And that's just another column for the matrix.
And this is why it was over 250 hours of staff time to get to this point.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate that staff was willing to take on, I don't know if willing is the right word. We kind of made you, but
they didn't quit.
You're all still here. Thank you. No, but I mean, we're asking a city staff of not enough people for a city that's trying to do the work we are to solve a national problem here. So I just really want to acknowledge that and I really appreciate that you gave it your level best, and your level best was pretty amazing.
I want to applaud Vera, too. She's put in, I don't know even how much. I think
Over
she
100
dreams
hours.
energy efficiency.
I don't, in fact. I don't.
She's solar powered, so.
But we hope that we've come up with a way of providing a better building for the extra floor that we hope that people are going to go for the bonuses, and happy to answer any more questions that you have about this.
Well, what do you guys think about just, I don't know why it bothers me that it's there, but pulling off the one that is unlikely to get used in this city simply because we don't have any buildings that will refurb like that?
So Alma came up while we were talking. She's fine removing it. She doesn't know of any buildings that would need to use it in order to be successful.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Alma's great removing it because it is only for rehab, and you would have to still get those 4th and 5th floors. So the goal would be that you'd be in a central district like this, and you'd be adding floors like this. And just knowing where our NMIA district is and how much work would have to go into those buildings to get any sort of height or anything, I think they're probably pretty safe that these are going to be predominantly new buildings, and you could hold them to these standards and still be successful.
Yeah. And we'll find out. I mean, if someone comes to us with a rehab and they tell us, you know.
It's a code.
We're going to do a 5-star rehab out of the old card store down there.
Yep. Anything can happen.
We'll do a really quick code amendment.
I mean.
Because there's only one section now if you adopt what she's
Super fast.
recommending.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other discussions, conversations? Have we received any other, I know Lisa asked about the builders, but any other correspondence from anybody whatsoever?
Nothing.
So I do, before we keep going, we did receive an unbelievable amount of resource and help from the development community, the architecture community, from businesses in town, from people, affordable housing teams who are working on buildings in town. I know that we don't have to call those into the record, but I do want to thank them. The amount of effort that they put into this was really pretty exceptional. So thank you to them.
Yes, it's pretty cool for a little bitty town.
Does that count as community engagement?
It does. I think this very much so counts as
Gold
that.
star.
Yeah.
It's platinum.
Thank you. You're right.
All right, so no more questions for these guys? All right. Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed amendments? No one? Okay. So I'm going to skip the whole public testimony part. Since there's no testimony to respond to, and you guys already said you had no questions. If there are no further questions from the council, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. A second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on the proposed green building and building height variance code amendments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. The public testimony part of the hearing on the proposed green building and building height variance code amendments, file number ZA-2018-004, is hereby closed. Is there council discussion?
You keep looking at me. I'm so tired. I can't start the discussion.
Staff did a lot of work. We've got great information. Can we move forward with it?
I think so. I mean, we fixed the one glaring problem that we had, and we learned a whole lot about green building codes.
So much.
Yeah.
Well, and I was comforted to learn that that many builders in all likelihood will default to the path to net zero just because of its simplicity, because it's a really good program, and it's that has so much staff support. It's well-researched. I mean, I'm most familiar with that out of all of them, but even putting that bias aside, I think it's the one that will get us the buildings we want, but I don't necessarily feel a need to mandate that be the only choice. It's just the obvious best choice, so.
Well, I mean, there's some very cool, passive house buildings are awesome. The Earth Advantage, the Living Building Challenge, all of those are really cool. So if we got a living building, somebody wanted to do a living building, I'm all in.
That would be super cool.
But you're right. I think, you know, the least expensive, easiest path is going to give us efficient buildings, twice as efficient in most cases. As the Oregon Building Code.
Yeah. And I don't want to preclude people doing something like a living building.
Yeah.
No.
If they want to do a living building, that's a 6th story. Then we talk.
All right. Is council ready to vote? Yes. Yep. Okay. Then I would entertain a motion.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm not awake today. What page? No, someone else should just do it.
Okay, I move for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Title 19 zoning to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness. File ZA-2018-004.
I second.
Removing, don't we have to?
Removing item number
I'm just
6 on the list.
Removing item number 6 on the list
Oregon
of
Housing Community Services.
recommendations. Yeah.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Title 19 zoning to make changes to select sections of for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness. File number ZA-2018-004, removing item 6, Oregon Housing and Community Services Green Building Path from the list. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Ms. Ober, would you like to read the ordinance twice by title only?
An ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Title 19 zoning to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness, file number ZA 2018-004, excluding Oregon Housing and Community Services Green Building Path. And again, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Title 19 zoning to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness, file number ZA 2018-004, excluding Oregon Housing and Community Services Green Building Path.
Mr. Stauffer, would you please poll the council?
Councilor Heisey.
Aye.
Council President Falconer.
Aye.
Councilor Beatty.
Aye.
Councilor Parks.
Aye.
Mayor Gamba.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0, ordinance 2170.
So staff, thank you very, very much. Excellent work. Job well done. Sorry for all the drama.
When did you start on this package? A year ago? Yeah.
Well, really, we started on it when we did moving.
Well, we did, but I mean, as housekeeping.
Yes, right.
We started a year ago.
It's been 10 months.
10 months, yeah.
Yay. All right, next up, our Public Works Director, Peter Pastorelli, will be introducing our Urban Forest Management Plan for adoption. It's a resolution.
Thanks. Captain, did you want to?
He's got everybody in the city.
All 20,000.
Good evening, Mayor Gamba and Council. Tonight I'm going to be talking about our Urban Forest Management Plan, talk a little bit about the process that we went through, where the Tree Board is requesting that the Council adopt the plan. Also talk a little bit about the plan itself, and then some of the revisions that we've made over the past month and a half since we first brought it to you in January. Also tonight with us are two other tree board members, Gina Dake and Linda Carr, and then our tree board chair, Kathleen, is here tonight.
Nice.
And then we'll leave it up for a little bit of, if you have any questions.
Okay.
Oops, let me see here. There we go. So just as the green building standard was a long process, this has been this has been a long process also. We originally started working on this urban forest management plan all the way back in February of last year, where we presented to City Council at a work session the tree board's goals and work plan for the year. And in that work plan, we identified the urban forest management plan as one of the items that they wanted to work on, as well as starting to work on public outreach and education within the community, and start to work on tree code updates as well. As we started going down that path, we determined that we really needed to focus on that urban forest management plan to set the goals and the structure for future potential changes to the tree code. So we drafted the plan that early part of the spring and into the summer. And then once we had a draft, we decided it was important to reach out to the community and to do some engagement with the community. And we had a pretty, I think a pretty decent community engagement process where we went out and tree board members went to many community events, NDA events, farmers markets. I think Linda was at farmers markets just about every other week, it seemed like. But so we reached out to the public. We put on an online survey to get feedback, to see what the community thought of the plan and potential code updates. And then we took that information and we made revisions to that plan over the fall of this year. We put a draft together, had a final draft ready in December, and then in the early part of January of this year, we brought that draft to council for discussion and to get feedback from the council. We received that feedback, and then over the last month and a half, we made some revisions to the plan based on that feedback. So the plan itself, and I've gone over this several times in the past, it focuses on six main areas, 6 focus areas, focused on canopy coverage, age and diversity of our species, managing our trees in healthy conditions, maximizing the benefits and minimizing hazards and conflicts with street trees. So basically that street tree management piece. And then consolidating tree management within the city, and then fostering community support by having a broad community engagement process. So the plan is really set up with an introductory piece, and then each of those focus areas, we've identified a goal. And I've put a little example here together that you can take a look at. So in this case, we're looking at the forest health goal. So it starts off with that forest health goal, and then we've identified an objectives for those goals, framing questions for each of those objectives to make sure that the actions that we identify help us reach our stated goals, and then actions which sort of identify near-term strategies to reach those goals. And in this case, what I've done is I've put up one of the objectives from our forest health objectives, promoting proactive tree maintenance by supporting community members with creative resources. I pulled this one out because I wanted to focus a little bit on being able to help community members with that might have hardships or difficulties with tree maintenance. So this is one of those objectives that we want to make sure that we address as we move forward. So I wanted to highlight that. That was based off some of the discussions we had last month. And then we have that action item down at the bottom. And each of those goals, each of those sections have action items associated with that. And then at the end of the plan, there's an implementation guide, a 2-year, actually a little 2-year plus implementation guide, I would say, that identifies those actions that we want to work on, the short term and medium term and long term items. And then as in the staff report, I wanted to sort of show you the flavor of the revisions that we made to the plan. We sort of went from a more prescriptive document where we were saying we were going to adopt provisions to basically saying we were going to consider these things and bring these different actions as appropriate to council for future consideration. So this is sort of what we did with that language to make those changes. So we, instead of saying will, we changed it to could or consider and things of that nature. So this is sort of an example of those types of revisions that we made. And then we view these sort of as the next steps once the plan's adopted. We are working on updating our street tree list. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. It's been a project that crosses not just the tree board's interest, but it's the engineering department's very interested in that, and we've got lots of projects going on, and right now we're still using an older street tree list that seems to have some problems with it from.
And is there a single street tree list, or are there different lists for different types of streets? I mean, if you're under the wires, it's one height, and if you're not under the wires, you can have bigger trees?
Yeah, the street tree list in the Public Works standards, there's different lists for different conditions focused on that site. And, for example, if you're under utilities, how much space you have to plant. So it takes in those types of things into consideration. So we're looking at making adjustments to that list. And then there's another list as well that's as part of the public area requirements list that's focused on downtown, that's very street specific, that focuses, on this block of Main Street, you have to plant this type of tree. And on Jefferson, it's got to be this type of tree. So we're looking at that as well, and that requires some coordination with the planning department and perhaps the Design and Landmark Committee. I think they were involved in developing that, in the Planning Commission as well. So we're looking at making making some suggested changes to that as well. So yeah.
Can I just have to make sure that removing invasive species is also part of that discussion, because I've heard
the street tree list.
Yes, I've heard numerous complaints from individuals in my neighborhood about that. So
about our street tree list having invasive species?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, because Norway maple.
Is that on our street tree list? Oh yeah, that
chain tree. There's a number. I'm not going to remember all of them, but there were a number of them that were on the list that are considered invasives by Portland and by other places in the state. So.
Oh yeah, we removed Norway maple from Spring Park. It was all it is invasive.
Tree of Heaven is not on
our list.
Tree list.
Shocking.
I just want to say.
Planet all over.
Yeah.
Sprouting up all over the place anyway.
Yeah, so certainly that's something that we're looking at, those invasive pieces. And then the other part that we mentioned in the plan too is, we want to look towards the future to make sure that we're planting trees that are are going to thrive, 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Like Tree of Heaven.
I'd be the only tree left.
Yeah.
Those big fussy leaves.
So I think it's an amazing plan. I'm a bigger fan of more direct language than could and might and things like that, but I get the purpose. What I was hoping for that maybe I missed, this is a pretty dense thing, with most of our master plans, which I sort of consider this like a master plan, like the sewer master plan, the streets master plan, and there is at least a calculation, a back of the envelope of some concept of, and this will be the cost to do this. I think at some point in the not too distant future, we need to establish a number that is something we can start to have conversations about on the budget committee to say, okay, we have money for all these other master plans. We have money to start to build out these systems or to fix the systems or whatever the case may be. This particular aspect does not have any kind of funds that are ongoing, that are going to reach our goal of being of 40% canopy. So I think that definitely wants to be done before the next time we do the budget, and probably the sooner the better, because I think Mr. Labby brought up a great concept that hadn't even crossed my mind, that that this might be, if we can talk Metro into agreeing that this could be an interesting way to use a portion of the parks bond to sort of spread the parks throughout the neighborhoods.
I think that's a fair criticism. I would say though, there are certain there's certain pieces of or there's certain batches of information or data that we really don't have yet, in terms of we don't have a tree inventory that would help drive what the costs of some of these programs are going to be. I think we've identified as one of the actions is that we need to do a tree inventory. We need to use the tools that are out there to get us the best picture of what our urban forest looks like. We've used some LiDAR information from 2014. We're working with Vivek Chandis for a tool that will help us even better get a better understanding of our urban canopy. But it is critical to do a tree inventory, and those can be expensive. And there's some opportunities working with Ted and other partners to perhaps share costs and partner on those sorts of things to keep the costs down. But it's a piece that's missing, so we've got to work there. I had identified some costs associated with a tree inventory at the last budget cycle, and it just wasn't a high enough priority at the time to make it in. But we'll work towards including those costs and building a better program cost for these items.
One of the things that Peter and I have talked about is just that this is a key part of the climate action plan, and as we're moving, now that we have Natalie, who is incredible on the team, and we're moving forward, we'll be going into the next budget cycle again, trying to find ways to fund council's priorities, and this has been one of the key things that Peter's been talking about even since before the last budget, just as being a priority, is finding ways to both implement the plan but also maintain it, and making sure that we're maintaining our assets in a way that keeps the resource healthy. So I really appreciate how much of a champion he has been around this. I think it's a passion of his and it's a passion of the departments, and we expect you'll see something in the budget cycle around that.
Yeah, I'm guessing you got a copy of the letter too from the Arbor, or whatever they're called, Foundation.
Arbor Day.
Foundation. They sent out a letter, just one page, surprisingly, talking about a program that they're launching to plant. It was several million trees over the next, I think it was 10 years. No, not even 2 years, something like that. It was really a lot, really fast. And they were wanting all their partner tree cities to engage and to, step up into that goal. I left my copy with Jordan, but put a note on it to say, coordinate with Peter on outreach that we might do around this, but, so you didn't get it?
I don't think I've seen that
All
letter.
right, maybe I'll retrieve it and get it to you.
Okay, great. So then, one of the other things that we really want to work on too are some drafting some code that looks at public and street trees, some development-related code, and also considering looking at private properties as well. And those are things that we're going to engage with the community. We'll be transparent about and make sure that people really sort of understand the trade-offs of those different things. So those are things we'll be bringing back to council as we work on those different packages. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that at all, or?
Thank you. Well, Mayor Gamba, members of the council, it's nice to be here this evening. So I guess I would start just by commending Peter and my predecessor, Andy Taylor, who's moved to Bend, but who certainly put a lot of work into this plan. And hopefully it meets the direction that you provided earlier. And I think it still reflects the intent of the tree board. When I think about this work that we're trying to do together at the tree board, I try to take the long view, recognizing that I feel a sense of urgency that I know some of you share around climate change, but this is complex work and it has a lot of impacts on people, and the economic impacts and the potentially disproportionate impacts are real and challenging, and that's something we have to figure out how to navigate together. So I feel like we're just starting in some of that work. I guess I'd also say I wasn't here when Mr. Labby maybe testified this evening about a potential metro bond. There's also pending state legislation that, as I understand it, has some potential for investments for urban trees relating to climate mitigation. And I know that there's
Do you know what the bill number is so we can support it?
HB 2020.
Oh, that's in HB 2020? I guess I haven't seen that.
I believe so.
Cool. We've been supporting that one.
And then I think there are also some new offset protocols around cities and urban tree canopy. They're interesting. I don't know that much about those, but I think those would be something that we should take a look at and see if they're relevant here in City of Milwaukee, and something that we might want to explore more. So I don't know that I have too much more to offer for you this evening, but looking forward to continuing this work and working with the council and working with the tree board on the implementation and some of the things that Peter's highlighted tonight.
We never got to really introduce you when you joined the tree board because that process is so separated. But how well do all of you know Kathleen? Mm-hmm. So she was the head of Metro's, I always get the name of the department wrong, it's Parks and...
Green Spaces. Parks and Nature.
Parks and Nature for years. She was not decades, but for as long as I've been engaged with Metro, let's put it that way. And she was instrumental in helping us get the money for improving the bridge across Kellogg
for the
Lake.
pedestrian bridge, yeah.
And lots of other park things, when we did phase 1 of the park and stuff like that. And now you're with Nature Conservancy, or?
I do work for the Nature Conservancy, that's right.
Yeah. So we kind of have a superstar on our...
We do.
On our tree board. I just wanted you guys to know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that introduction. I'm happy to be here. And actually, when my family and I moved to Milwaukee 2 years ago, we chose Milwaukee because some of the policies that we saw that you were all advocating for and putting in place here in the city, and it felt like a place that shared our values and somewhere we wanted to be. So I'm happy to be in the Island Station neighborhood. So thank you.
Yeah.
The one other thing that I really did want to mention, and Ann mentioned it, I think already, but what we're doing, what we've identified in this urban forest management plan really aligns with strategies we've identified in our climate action plan as well, under the natural resources section. So, we've identified growing our canopy. We've identified focusing in some of the lower income, perhaps some of the neighborhoods that might have lower incomes that may not have a robust canopy, trying to reduce that urban heat island effect. And so it aligns very well with what we're doing with our climate action plan. I did just wanted to touch a little bit more on outreach and engagement, because I know that's important. You know, we really want to make sure that we get feedback from the community on these programs that we've identified in the Urban Forest Management Plan. And we want to use that feedback to make revisions and make sure that we've addressed the needs of the community when we write and draft code. And then we bring something that fits the needs of our community. We want to make sure that we're also engaging that a diverse cross-section of the community as well, and not just focused on people that are just interested in trees. So we want to make sure that we get broad interest there, and make sure that people understand the trade-offs for some of the things we might be identifying. What does it mean? So those are just some of the things I wanted to point out that are important as in our next steps.
Yeah, that one list that you guys, it's pretty early in the report or in the plan that sort of talks about all the benefits of trees, would be like the perfect splash page for your web presence, so that's the first thing people see and gets driven into their minds over and over and over. Here's all the benefits of why you want a tree, why you don't want to cut down a tree that's, okay, I got to rake the leaves, you know, a couple times every year. I think it's really, we've worked pretty hard to try and get that message out. We've had Donovan, I always forget his first name.
Jeffrey Donovan
come in and speak, and we've had, you know, different things to try and get that message out. But I think that's a key message, because a lot of folks, it's a tree that was in their yard when they bought their house, and they don't really care, or, oh, I'm going to plant a garden, maybe I should cut down my tree. And, you know, it's I think it's helpful for them to understand all the benefits.
Well, and I mean, you know, Linda's a big active garden club person, gardener. I mean, I think the thing I've learned just in the last few years, and I've been, you know, I've owned my house for 15, but is don't rake those leaves or rake them into your flower beds.
Right.
Because this year I had like 20 robins, because they're finding all kinds of things in those leaves in there. So don't clean your beds. Leave those leaves there. They're good.
I actually drove out to my dad's house. He lives in the forest, and picked up bags of maple leaves for my new flower beds because of the benefits, because that's how you build good soil structure.
Right.
You allow leaves to fall and rest on the soil and have critters come up and eat them, and then it turns into this beautiful stuff that grows me food.
Right. So, yeah, there's lots of public education like that we could be doing. Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, also planning around, you know, not just on public spaces where to plant trees, but even in your own yard where to plant trees. You know, how best to take advantage of, like, the placement of your house and in relation to the sun, you know, whether...
Keeping your house cool in the summer. And
But also being, you know, if you're planning on solar, then being aware of that. Or if you are going to plant a garden, don't plant your tree right just directly south of it. I mean, there, you know, there could be programmatic things that I think that folks, you know, like that splash page, I mean, I think that, you know, lots of sort of imagery, I think, would be really good too, not just lists of things, but...
Maybe instead of just sitting at the booth at the farmer's market this year, we can work up little...
Ooh, like
a diorama. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. This is going to be fun.
Oh, man. Perfect for kid table.
Lego kind of diorama.
We'll talk later.
Okay.
Cool.
Any other questions or comments? Or
great work.
Thank you.
Great work. Yeah.
Very comprehensive.
I'd really like to, you know, thank the tree board and.
Yeah, you guys did an outstanding job. I know it's been a lot of work and there's been a lot of pressure, but you did great, and I look forward to seeing the things you're going to be working on soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we are looking for a resolution adopting this
Yes,
tonight.
yes.
I move to approve the resolution adopting the 2019 Urban Forest Management Plan.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution adopting the 2019 Urban Forest Management Plan. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. And I'm guessing since our city attorney is out with a broken
doing it.
neck.
Can we take a break?
Sure.
Yeah, let's take a
But I
break.
am
5 minutes,
prepared.
6 minutes, 7 minutes? What do you need?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. We will be recessed for 5 minutes. All right, so we are back on, and next item is in other business, e-scooters and business licenses, a discussion.
So at the end of the last discussion on e-scooters, we had received a general trajectory from council that we were going to offer a business license. As we were concluding that conversation, the city attorney asked to have a couple of weeks just to do a little additional research to make sure that we weren't going to have any issues. He is out tonight, so I'm trying to pretend to be an attorney, like Kelly tries to pretend to be an engineer. Bear with me. In general, we can offer the business license, and that's a completely legitimate way to go down this path. We do not, in our code, have a way to retract a business license, but it is possible. In other cities, there are codes that you could adopt to retract it, or you could pass a future ordinance in order to retract it. It's not abnormal to have us have a process for doing so. With that understanding, we're assuming that council is still going down that same path. I will, as the administration, probably send a letter to these companies just outlining to them that we are considering this a pilot, namely for the sake that they don't invest and then have an issue come up over the first year where the council decides to retract without giving them a fair heads up that is always possible. So it'll be a brief letter outlining that we'll expect that they follow state laws and that we hope that they would follow best practices when it comes to things like ADA and other components. And we'll just leave it at that. It won't be an enforcement letter. It will be a statement that allows us future action should you want to have future action without a whole lot of pushback from the companies.
Great. Wouldn't you just do it as time limited to the Portland pilot too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we actually have to pull them off the street at that point, but it does tie us to that program a little bit. And it's a natural date barrier. This will not be any staff. This will literally be me writing the letter, and we will wait until we hear from a company that they're pulling a business license to send them the letter, just to make sure that we are fully transparent that this could change at a future date. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's really it. I do believe that we received 4 nods last week, so we're going to proceed with that path. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Next up, council input on legislative and regional issues presented by our engineer slash government affairs slash city manager, assistant city manager slash.
No, she's the city manager some days. Yeah, she does all the things.
Kind of like a lint roller. I was like,
Step up.
Just kidding.
It's a great visual. It really is.
Yeah. As of tonight, I actually just decided to kind of give you my notes. So that's what this little sheet is just the things that I was tracking from the last meeting that I thought we may or may not want to talk about. I did print off the LOC list again. Pretty much migrated any of the items I added last time to the Word document. So it's getting a little cumbersome. This one is big and small writing, so you may want to draw your attention more to the Word document. I think we should start actually with the bill that we have, a draft letter for consideration, which is yours, Councilor Beatty. So that's SB 927. I'm going to let you give a quick recap of that, but in front of you should be a short, it doesn't look like letter. It's not formatted like a letter, but it's letter text that Councilor Beatty and I believe Councilor Heisey, you didn't work on it? It was just you? Okay.
Yeah, I worked with one of the DLC members on it.
Worked on today. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to you and
okay. So I'd sent an email last week when I'd seen the notification from Restore Oregon, which is kind of the lead preservation organization in Oregon, about these. There's two bills actually. There's 927 and 929. And 927, and I sent today. I sent everybody both the fact sheets that Restore Oregon did on the two bills. But 927 is about making the process of designations easier, giving cities and localities, counties, I assume too, the tools to do their designation of historic properties more easily. Oregon actually has the most restrictive state law on this in terms of only doing it by consent of the property owner. And so, again, this is just giving us a tool. It's not mandating anything. It's just giving us a tool to use. And we, you know, our comp plan is calling for us to update our historic property inventory and all of that. So this is just a simple letter in support of 927. 929 is a tax rebate funding thing for that would allow, provide for some tax rebates for rehabbing old buildings, and 25% for general rehab and 35% for seismic reinforcement of old buildings. A lot of it is set to there's a priority put on housing. I immediately thought of this building. And I'm like, oh, maybe we want to support that because maybe it's for this, maybe we want to tap into that for this. But a lot of it's for housing. And so I put out a feeler to Alma, and I didn't really get a response. But my sense is we don't have multifamily housing that's really that old and that probably needs that kind of rehab.
Sorry, Counselor. I did get a response.
Oh,
so
you did?
If you wanted both from the planning staff on the first bill, they're very supportive of 927 and us doing a letter. On 929, they thought that the building, even though it's not housing that would qualify, the most likely would be St. John the Baptist would be the best example of a building that has a historic nature on it that would need to receive funding in order to have the improvements made on the facility for seismic upgrades.
So they thought we should support that?
Yeah, they were
encouraging
supportive of
us to support that.
What about schools?
So this is, you know more about the legislation. I know that schools have
Never got a
received
chance to
funding.
read it, so I'm completely kind of flying blind here.
And I'm dependent on staff.
Well, and I think there might already be a funding pot for schools on seismic retrofits. I kind of think there is.
Even for private schools?
I
Because the Waldorf
I don't know the answer to that.
school is a, whatever it is, 1927
historic.
building. And yes, just based on the concept, I have a couple of little red flags about this. One, it reads like we, the city, can pronounce that as a historic building.
And we can. That's what it does.
Well, I mean, it makes, you have to have a process. You have to have a community process. You have to have a community benefits kind of test. It's not just.
But can the person who owns the building say absolutely not?
Nope.
Right. They can object, but they can't say absolutely not.
Can't stop it. So
It removes that there's a law that gives owner consent, and this 927
removes that. So the experience as the chair of the facilities committee at the Waldorf School for 5 years or whatever it was, the city had put a historic designation on that building. And because of that, we couldn't replace the windows with modern, efficient windows, even though the windows that were in it were not the original windows. They were something that someone had replaced some time previously. We couldn't put solar on the roof. We couldn't replace the front steps after the skateboarders damaged them really badly. We couldn't, there was like 2 or 3 other things, without spending $3,000 and however many months for a planning commission hearing that you didn't know whether you were going to get approval or not. The school found it a really onerous thing to have placed on them, that they,
Well, I mean, it was placed on the school that they bought. It wasn't placed
whatever.
on.
The point is, if I owned a building and didn't particularly care one way or the other whether it was historic or not, and that kind of limitation was put on what I could do with my building, I would be really upset.
Well, and I also have red flags about the removal of owner consent, because the way that this is, the way that it reads to me and the way that it it appears very geared toward a scenario like this. Maybe my house, a neighborhood association decides that my house is a historic asset and it applies to the city for designation. I would be somewhat more interested, but I'd be, well, not interested, maybe more amenable to supporting this if 927 actually laid out what some of the criteria would have to be in that planning, in that land use process that a city would have to adopt, but it doesn't talk at all about that. Like, what would the criteria be? It just says a city should have some sort of a land use process for designation. It doesn't lay out any kind of, some kind of bare minimum standards about what a city must, require before a neighborhood association could designate my personal house as a historic.
Well, so that's for us to do, right?
Well,
that's for us to do in establishing the process.
Your own personal property in the hands of some future not in my backyard council to make up rules for an activist. I mean,
we're talking about doing that for trees. We're talking about having people be able to designate heritage trees.
Your home is not the same as a tree, and we are not even close to being there yet. Not even close. I mean, this is. To me, this was written with some specific audiences in mind, and I think about whole neighborhoods trying to designate their entire neighborhood as historic to prevent housing development, and that is, as it reads currently, that is how this would be used and abused.
That was my second red flag. That this, and I don't know what the genesis of this was, but as I was imagining it just from reading the letter, I was like, wow, this sounds like it could have come out of, what's the neighborhood that keeps trying to keep?
Eastmoreland.
Eastmoreland. Specifically designed so that Eastmoreland could protect.
Well, but Eastmoreland would have to convince Portland to do it. This doesn't give Eastmoreland isn't a jurisdiction with any tools. Eastmoreland would have to convince Portland. But Portland has to set a process. And we would have to set a process. So we would set the terms of what the standard is to do this. We need to be doing that anyway. I mean, our comp plan is going to call for us to revisit our code on that front anyway. So it's not, it's putting the ball in our court. It's just like what we want and, what we asked for with getting rid of a ban on inclusionary zoning or getting rid on a ban on rent control. It's asking the cities, it's asking for a tool for cities to have more of a tool.
That's the opposite. That's telling, this is telling homeowners that they cannot do something.
No, it's telling cities that they can tell. It's giving cities the leeway to do that. It's not mandating anything. It's giving cities a tool. It's giving cities a tool to do that. A city could do that, you're right.
Cities have put in place exclusionary zoning, which means that property owners cannot build certain types of housing on their properties. What we've supported, what 2001 does, is removes that barrier. This is potentially putting on additional barriers on property owners that they don't.
It is potentially, but you're right. But it's giving cities a tool. It's all about home rule. We talk about home rule in all kinds of
other people's houses.
Home rule, you know what I mean. Home rule as state law, meaning giving the power to the cities, giving the power to the localities. Well, yeah, don't try to turn the word home rule into something else.
Well, this takes away owner consent. So that really is.
It says we can take away owner consent.
It repeals immediately. The very first sentence of 927 introduced repeals ORS 197.772, which is the owner consent law of Oregon.
But that doesn't automatically.
Yes, it does. It repeals 197.772, consent for designation as historic property. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, local government shall allow a property owner to refuse to consent any form of historic property designation, and so on. It doesn't amend it, it deletes it.
Does this only address residential? I mean, when I think of something like historic buildings, quite frankly, I hardly ever think of residential, although I know there are some that are. And I happen in my past to live in 2 different cities that were very, very historic communities. In fact, the building I bought in Montana was over 100 years old when I bought it. And the only reason it's still standing now is because those buildings are protected. They're protected by the city being able to designate that they cannot be torn down. The same in Hanford, California. In fact, as a matter of fact, the same in Porterville, California. The school district tore down the old high school, which was 14 times more beautiful than the Milwaukie High School, had the columns, had the everything, and they said it was unsafe. But when they tore it down, they damn near couldn't even tear it down because it was so well structured that it was a mess to try to get it down. So the city then, made sure that those kind of things couldn't happen in the future. I personally don't know about houses and how that works, but I see a lot of, like the Masonic Temple next door, this building, there's even a couple houses I can think of, but other buildings that I would hate for somebody to come in and just say, we're just going to tear them down, which are some of the kinds of things that are occurring even in the Oak Grove area where they've done that. So I don't know about the housing. I'd also be interested in is Oregon a state that's alone in this way of thinking, or are most other states something else, something different? I don't know the bill well enough to have an opinion. I just wanted to share what I've had as personal experiences.
Well, so if you read down, Councilor Falconer read the first line, but if you read section 3.2, as part of its comprehensive plan, a local government may adopt a historic resource program that fosters and encourages the identification, designation, and protection of historic resources within the local government's jurisdiction, consistent with statewide land use planning goals and rules. And then it inventories, it lists sort of what that kind of a program must include. What it must include and what it may include is the localities have more latitude to say.
It doesn't, but it doesn't. I mean, if it were to, my problem is that it just simply repeals owner consent. It doesn't address, and then it doesn't then add some sort of guidance about that as part of the criteria. It just says some criteria. It doesn't lay out any kind of what that might mean. So
there's no basis to start with, is
right.
that what you're saying?
A city could adopt really minimum standards for designation, and my scenario could very well play out.
It could.
And
it could.
And it's not just, when you get to the tearing down stage, I think there's an argument to be made, but unfortunately with our historic designation, you can't change the front doorknob without a planning commission hearing.
Right, and that's way too severe.
Right.
But is that Milwaukee's or is that the if we aren't permitted to control that at this point in time, then that must be the state. That must be what the state says, and that in itself
or it could be our very antiquated code. I don't know the answer to that.
Because we are not going to be changing any of our own city code, and we probably are not going to have a significant impact on this, can I ask just for a straw poll so we can make a decision on if we want to have a group letter, or, Councilor Beatty has the right to send the letter individually by herself. I just want to figure out where we're at and move forward. Because I hear all of you, just so you know, Mayor, I did also look up the historic code. That was the part that was surprising me. The solar is actually allowed under the code.
It is now.
Yeah.
It was not at the time.
Okay.
So that must be state code.
That was something.
No, that was
under our
Milwaukie
ordinance. I just wanted to let people know here, if they're watching, if you are in a historic home and you want to do solar, you actually can under our existing code. So just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to look at that.
Can we call it? Where are you guys at?
Sure, we can do a straw poll. I'm not comfortable with this bill at this point. I think there's too much opportunity for not good things.
Okay.
Yeah,
I will remind you of this next time you want to talk about local control, because that's what this bill is about, local control.
I mean, I feel like local control is a very nuanced discussion, and it's definitely a double-edged blade in my understanding of how it works, because we can be well-intentioned and as a council do the right thing or promote values that we feel represent our community well. That means that we then have to trust that the values that we want to uphold elsewhere are similarly upheld by those councils, and that
doesn't always
and that just or that future councils do that here, and it's just a hard thing.
Well, it could be, if other cities are looking at this, that perhaps amendments would be added to it that help explain what some of the kinds of criteria are.
Baseline.
So that there's a little bit better idea of
some rails.
Yeah, I mean, there'd have to be rails to me.
A good, good terminology to use.
So, and I apologize, Councilor Heisey, I didn't see where you were on that thumb thing.
I'm about where Wilda is with my thumb going a little bit.
So right now we're at sort of a stay neutral if somebody individually wants to write one way or the other. Is that correct? Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, next. Okay. That was so quick and easy. Let's just hammer through all of it.
Well, I wanted to put it first because Council Beatty had written a letter and actually had researched it, so I'm glad we had a good time to talk about that. So some of these are just updates. Some of them I don't have. We have no other letters or resolutions on the table tonight, so I'm just going to run through and give you updates. HB 2001, I did send you a couple different emails, so sorry for packing your inbox. There is one amendment that's really proceeding at this point. There was a hearing just on that amendment, no work session presented by the speaker yesterday. I did watch it, and now I feel like I have a little better understanding of what's in that amendment and why it's in that amendment. So I think the main thing, I'm just going to run through it. It adds townhomes. They weren't in it before. So the amendment adds that to a list, a housing option. It actually takes all counties that are outside of a UGB out altogether. They're not in the bill. It changed the population level for cities outside of UGBs to 25,000 and up. Council Beatty, you were asking about the duplex, what's going on with the duplex. The intention behind the duplex language in there is to actually provide cities between 10 to 25,000 just do duplexes. You don't have to do any of the other housing options. You can just allow duplexes on any single family, but that's what they're kind of giving.
And that's what the draft, when we talked about it and did our letter, that's what the draft said for everybody, for all sizes.
So this is that's what the -10, that's the intent of the -10. Again, I didn't necessarily read it closely enough and I'm not a lawyer to know if there's any unintended consequences of that, but the purpose of it is to try to make sure that cities of our size, smaller cities within an UGB, can just do the duplex option. They also added some language to clarify that single-family homes are still unallowable use. You aren't precluding single-family living. So, they did actually change the compliance times a little more than I gave them credit for. So they added a year to cities within the UGB. The timeline remains for the duplex option, though. So if you're just going to amend your code to allow duplexes, the same time frame remains. But for the cities within a UGB over 25,000 that are doing the full middle housing option, they have, I think, a full year beyond what they had before, so it's almost 3 years. So it is better. Those are the high points. They did also add verbiage in there about triggering comp plan map amendments and other amendments. I think there was some concern from the housing advocacy community that cities would say, well, that requires a comp plan amendment, or that requires, which is a lengthy process, so we can't proceed. So they've attempted to put some sideboards in there about what you can say triggers a comp plan amendment related to the legislation. So in terms of the league is still opposed to this. They feel like it's still kind of getting into city business and putting some restrictions on cities that they don't feel like are they should let cities decide. That's sort of the home rule argument. They did point out, I do want to dig into the SDC language. So for me, for us, you guys approved us to talk about 3 things. You said overall we support it. The timeline is too aggressive. The SDC collection, the way you have it laid out, is problematic. And you should help people with technical resources. The technical resources are taken care of. Now that I understand the timeline a little bit better, I think we can say they checked the box on that one. The SDCs is still hanging out there as an issue. So when I talked with Sam, she said, well, it's better than it was before. But the way that the SDC language is written, your only recourse is you can collect, but if they don't pay, you would be forced to either show up and kick people out, which probably not something we'd want to do. Or you could put a lien on the property, but because the legislation is written in a way that you can't charge interest, there's really not much incentive to actually pay it back.
So we're still not able to collect the SDCs until the building
We can collect it before.
sold.
We can collect it before, but we can't charge interest. Hold on, let me read what she wrote.
Because I have a
Yeah.
phone meeting scheduled tomorrow morning with
Right.
Taylor
so-
Smiley Wolf. So
What did she tell me? Hold on here. All right. Right now, we charge up front.
Right.
This language is better because we can require payment prior to completion of construction. Right? May not require. No, hold on.
Certificate of occupancy.
I'm going to read it again. Thank you. Be paid as a condition of the issuance of an occupancy permit for each dwelling, but may not require any payment prior to completion of construction.
Oh, that's fine then.
Yeah.
The local government may enforce the system development charge by an encumbrance against the property, but may not charge any interest. So, like I said, it's better than it was before.
Well, I thought we were only concerned about the condition of issuance of occupancy permit.
So if they don't have their
Right.
occupancy
They
permit,
you won't be kicking anybody out.
So originally the concern had been someone finishes construction, they put the house on the market, somebody buys the house, they go to move in and turn on their water. The water, we say, you don't have an occupancy permit. And they say, what do you mean I don't have an occupancy permit? This is sort of how it was relayed at the business meeting when we did the policy meeting. And so the concern from the districts had been making sure that there was an occupancy permit before it could go on the market.
I was going to say, you can sell a house without having the occupancy permit?
At the time when we were starting this legislation, that was the concern. I don't,
That wasn't what I read from Sam's email. That was not her concern. That might have been what some people at the, the
League.
Not league, it was at the Commerce.
It's the Chamber
of Commerce
meeting.
people were saying.
So I think if you're going to be talking to somebody tomorrow, rather than us purporting to know one way or the other, I would ask.
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on if we still have a problem. So she's the chief of staff for the chief policy person for the speaker.
Yep.
So it is better. I think in Sam's, when I was talking to her, she still felt there was a way that this could allow someone to occupy a home, and then our recourse would be to kick them out. I'll have to ask her that.
Can you have Sam write me a note in the morning that tells me how they could occupy the building without having a certificate of occupancy?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
2 more things though on it.
Okay.
So Bend and the Planning Association testified both. They just felt like the SDC language was unnecessary, that it's not going to help, and that they would prefer if they would be, we do this, we're excited about it, we want to help you. They were supportive of the bill, but can you just give us and let us use incentives, let us develop incentives that help us get this done, and don't tell us to do the SDC one. And so I think we might have some partners if we went down the path of, can you just give us some more flexibility on what suite of incentives we use, and not pin it all to the SDCs. So I think we should it's better.
Is the argument that the developers, if they don't have to pay that $35,000 up front, that they don't have to carry the $35,000 for a year while they build and market the house, that they're more likely to build these? I mean, that's the make or break, is the $35,000 on
We're not going to be able to give you the right answer. I don't want us to try. I think that the concern that I had is when they were doing testimony today, there was also someone from the APA, I thought, saying that they were still concerned about the SDCs.
Yep.
We're going to get you an answer. So the Planners Association.
They both just, the Planning Association said the delay of SDC payment won't help. It won't help you get what you want. And then LOC, SDC language is still problematic. And then Eric from Bend said, we think this is great, but delaying SDCs doesn't help. Let cities pick from incentives. It's not a single incentive that actually gets this done. It's a suite of incentives.
Yeah.
So let us do what we do, CET, you know.
It feels like it was something that some staff, well-intentioned staff person thought was a great way to get something to happen, and it's just on the ground.
I can totally hear it coming out of the mouth, because I've sat at so many tables with developers where they blame the entire reason that all housing is so expensive is SDCs.
So I will work with Sam to get some additional clarification, but I also think there are other entities at this point that are sort of beating the drum on maybe this isn't the tool you think it is. So I don't know if I'd spend a ton of time tweaking something that might be getting deleted.
Yep, cool.
Okay.
But your sense is it's moving forward.
Yeah, I think when the speaker shows up and talks through her bill and they only have one amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've had 10 amendments, right?
Well, but only one made it to the.
No.
Yeah.
It is telling.
Yeah, I would think I still think it's got a good chance of clearing the House, is my guess. But. Okay.
Diesel emissions.
Diesel emissions, there's a hearing. Like soon, in 2 days.
Okay. Yeah, when?
3/21 hearing scheduled in Energy and Environment. You want me to look up the time? Or it's, so.
That's Thursday.
Thursday. So that would be one if you all wanted tonight. If somebody wanted to draft up a letter, we could get it in.
Didn't we do a letter?
We do a letter on diesel? Great, we could send it back.
Yeah.
We already did it. We can just send it again.
Yeah.
Put a smiley face on it.
So we can
just send
okay,
it
so
as-
we'll just send that letter that you're right that we already did. And we'll just address it to the committee for the hearing. Okay. Thanks for reminding me, sorry.
Can I take the next one?
Please.
HB 2109 was a request for us to weigh in by Representative Power, and it was a question of whether or not this bill would impact our ability to do annexation. I talked to Denny, and HB 2109 would make it much more difficult to do an island annexation by requiring an affirmative vote from the folks being annexed. So his recommendation is that we oppose, and she would like to know where we stand.
Okay. Do you need?
Does anybody have a concern with us opposing?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely.
Is that Representative Clem?
Yep.
Damn.
Is that really?
He's always doing that.
Yep.
Well, actually, Denny's exact statement was, if it came from Representative Clem, you should probably oppose it.
Exactly.
Well, there's nothing scheduled, right? I mean,
she seemed to think that there was an annexation discussion coming up at the end of the week, and so she just wanted to know on this bill in particular.
Plastic bag ban, we've asked, there's a work session next week, and we've just been asked from LOC just to provide kind of technical comments review it to see if it causes any concern. So Alma gave comments to you, you passed them on to LOC. There's nothing, I think, really, we're talking through, like we said, we're supportive.
We're in support.
Yeah. So it's.
And Alma's comments were more just technical in nature about how we do this, and most of them I could answer without going to the LOC.
Yeah. Okay, QBS, passed the House. It's going to the Senate. Happy Valley.
What's QBS?
Qualification-based selection.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't write that up.
It allows you to bring the price into the conversation earlier than you could before on architects, engineers, surveyors.
So what does QBS stand for?
Qualification-based selection.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now, you'll notice that doesn't say price. So everything's set up to make sure you make your decision based on the qualifications of the proposal, not on the price that they offered. So now this will provide an option for certain types of contracts of a certain size to be able to get more information on price earlier. So it's a good thing. I feel like budgets.
Happy Valley.
All right, Happy Valley and NCPRD.
She's getting punchy.
Yeah, I mean, I love budget. There is a hearing scheduled for 3 p.m.
So I was talking to Ann about this morning. I kind of think we should submit a letter, not opposing it, but saying we want the same treatment for cities. I think we should ask to preserve our own flexibility. Their bill, because we entered under a different statute or whatever, a different method of entering the district. I mean, I just, you know.
Just so you're clear, I am neutral on this, but we did have that discussion. I just wanted to make sure staff knows.
So because we helped form the district rather than be a latecomer, this bill would not affect us if we decided to get it?
You know, we need Shane here to answer those questions about what the different statutes do, but there are different statutory ways of getting into a...
Most cities enter districts differently than this. So this was one of the rare instances where a city entered a district after it was formed, and it was by a vote of its population only. And so based on conversations I've had with Ben Bryant at Happy Valley, there is not another known group that has entered using this portion of law. They have all used the other portion of law when entering a district. So they are unique, and they believe that this fix would really only affect them or maybe a couple of others that they don't know about at this time.
Huh.
Interesting.
I mean, we don't know where we're going to be with NCPRD in 3 or 4 years. And maybe it's not in our interest for Happy Valley to get out easily either. But rather than opposing, I think we might just want to ask for similar treatment for it to apply to people.
Apply both ways that you can.
Yeah.
Enter a district.
You can get out of special districts.
So the hearing's on 3/28, right?
Yeah.
So do we have a little bit of time to
study it?
Just look at that a little bit more so that we can digest that and Justin can give us a little bit?
We will not meet again, just as a reminder before this. So you do have some time, but you don't have another meeting.
Right, we don't
to
have
discuss.
this. Yeah.
Councilor Beatty, what was how would you, I guess?
I don't know. I haven't really thought that through because you'd have to look at the other bill and
That's my only, I don't quite know the mechanics of the way this is written.
I just don't know enough.
The other way you go in, there's 2 ORS section,
The other stuff.
which, it's probably in stuff that Shane has written up for us in the past.
I have it in a dozen documents. I just don't have it at my fingertips.
Right. And I don't know that it has to be a particularly detailed letter. It's just if the committee's considering making it easier for people who enter this way to leave a district, we also think you should make it easier for other, people who enter the more standard way to leave a district.
But that could really backfire. I mean, when you put it that way, I have some reservations because, if others in the district decide for whatever reason to leave, and then that really...
Well, I mean, the special districts do have people kind of over a barrel. If you join a special district because you want regionalization of something, and as you grow, you might decide, I want to, our city wants to do that ourselves rather than have this regionalization. And right now, it's really onerous to decide that whether we're talking sewage or, parks or fire or anything, So, but special districts have a active association as well, so just like the League of Oregon Cities.
It's an interesting question. I don't feel like I have enough information at this point to have a robust enough discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really have time to do that. I mean, we have to either say, I mean, I see it as a, both protecting our, our flexibility down the road, but also maybe putting some brakes on this bill.
Yeah,
to be perfectly honest.
I'm almost agnostic on it because having them still be in the district and mad that they're still in the district is probably not any better than just not having them in the district. Probably it's worse because then they'll vote, and they have an ever-growing population, so they're going to become more and more the majority.
Right.
Boy, the DAB meetings would be fun.
Profound statement.
Yeah.
When are those again? The DAB meetings?
Yeah.
We'll just rethinking that being the DAB chair. Yeah.
So
I want it to be equitable, but I also am worried about the unintended, I think about, what that means for I don't know, maybe school district's not a good example, but, Happy Valley just takes all its money and walks away, and so we want to do that too. I don't know. I mean, maybe it should be easier to change districts, or maybe this just isn't the one size fits all.
What should be easier is to change
we want it to be.
the tax rate that a district charges while you're still a district, without having to end that district and create a new district with a new maximum tax rate. That's the dumbest rule on the planet.
Do we have to,
Yes.
Didn't they just try to change their tax rate 4 years ago when they ran?
Literally what that vote was, we will be dissolving the district and forming a new district with a maximum tax rate of 83 cents or whatever it was.
It sets a maximum.
And then everybody says, they're going to charge that right away. So of course you're not going to get it passed because people don't want to be charged that tomorrow. So instead of being able to say, and the district can vote to raise their tax rate at any time during its history, which would be sane.
2 out of 5 of the people sitting on the dais right now are yawning extensively.
Yes. Here we go. Moving along.
Technically, there's 2 more.
SB 558 authorizes cities to designate speed for highways, which cracks me up that they call, our little streets.
Yeah.
But anyway, under the city's jurisdiction, that is 5 miles per hour.
So while you all were in here doing important work, I actually watched the hearing they held a joint hearing on HB 2702 and SB 558 last week. Something like that.
They had 4 bills on that hearing.
It sounds like, based on that, I just want to give you an update. It sounds like they crafted a -1 amendment to 2702, which does expand it to all cities.
Okay.
So they're kind of merging those 2 things. However, it is going to a rulemaking process. The legislature wants some certainty around we'll hand this over to cities, but we do want some rulemaking in place around how that works. And so that is where it's headed. And I don't see that. So I'm just telling you.
It's really complicated.
Yeah,
It's probably one of the rules will be that it has to have some sort of a transportation, body, like PBOT or.
No,
have its own, so
it'll be something with ADT. So they have something right now where you can go in for gravel roads or really rural roads, and they would just tell cities or counties that they could set the speeds on that ODOT wasn't getting involved, and they just set some criteria, like it has to have an ADT of 2,000 or lower or whatever it is. So I think what you'll find is some frameworks around rulemaking about what these routes can be, and they may have some process around it. I don't believe that process, based on everything they're showing right now about their work, is going to be 85th percentile. I don't think it's going to be that. They spent the entire presentation prior to that talking about how they're working through this roundtable in Washington County and Eugene and PBOT, and everybody saying they felt like things were going in a good direction with speed setting on lower roads. So I think this was all coming together to kind of funnel in with these existing conversations around speed setting that are happening statewide, but have the legislative vehicle in place so that the state can tell a city, you set it, you set the speed, but
you just have to follow these rules. But we don't do them anymore. You do it. But they got to go figure out what those rules are. And that will come out of these roundtables. So again, this is another one of those things, like, we can send more letters and we can say the same as it's kind of moving along and continue to support it. But you guys can watch the hearing, but to me it sounds like they cut a deal and between the state and the cities, and it's these -1 amendments to HB 2702. So I think that's what you're going to see moving through the process, is that. Photo radar, they held a hearing on those bills. I don't know where they're going just yet, but the league came down and supported them. The one related to SB 560, there was that bill that had that long list of cities, of which we were one, and it just got rid of that list and says cities can do it. So it opens it up to more cities. I haven't actually stared at the high crash corridor. We don't have designated high crash corridors. Do we have a designated high crash corridor?
Well, actually, no, we only have one.
We don't have a high crash corridor program.
I thought was.
But our portion of it, I don't believe is.
The state
isn't just in Milwaukee.
Right, I believe, yeah. It's too low. Been too successful.
I think the definition high crash corridor for me has always been PBOT's high crash corridor program. So I need to look at that in the context of, I need to read the bill more and see what we've got or what we don't have. But in general, I told Ann asked me, I'll tell you all, I think photo radar is good. Any tool that helps get people to slow down is a good thing. In places where they need to slow down. And then from here on, I don't know how much you want to talk about these. Mary, last time you had asked about the different bills. And so I pulled 262 and 737, just the text kind of from the measure summaries on those. So that you can compare and contrast. 262 is going tomorrow for a hearing in Senate Finance and Revenue. And I don't think I showed you when 737 is happening. Hold on.
So 262 would encompass 737 as long as you were doing it in multifamily residential style, right? So we could then set our own rules as to which things we were willing to give tax exemption to? Are you understanding my question?
I think so.
That if 262 passed, we could tax exempt just affordable housing as long as it's multifamily.
Right. The difference between 262 and 737 is the multifamily component.
Well,
right.
262 is more broad. It's like any multifamily, and 737 is only
affordable
housing, which is the one that I really care about. I don't have any.
Yep. You're reading it correctly.
Huh?
Yes, you're reading it correctly. So right now it looks like 262 is development of any multi-unit and 737 is affordable housing.
And would a cottage cluster be considered a multi-unit? If we did it on the same property?
It depends on who did it.
Yeah.
And it depends on who did it, right? Because this is about nonprofits and housing authorities making projects.
So just status-wise, sorry, because I forgot to put it on, 737 has cleared the policy committee and is headed over to tax expenditures. Did they rename Ways and Means tax expenditures? Did I miss this? What is tax? Anyway, there's a tax expenditures committee and it's going there.
There's still Ways and Means.
Okay, I don't understand so that's another problem for today. Is I don't understand why we just made a tax expenditure committee. But anyway, it's going there with a due pass recommendation.
Good.
Next week on the 28th. So it looks like 737 is progressing, but the 262 is getting
a hearing tomorrow.
As a hearing, so.
So, I mean, they're both progressing. I mean, if it's having a hearing, it's at least still on the...
Yeah. Well, we're at a deadline right now. I think you have to have... You have to have a hearing in your originating body by the end of this month, right? By the end of next week, you have to have had it or you can't get out. You can't. Your bill's dead.
So all the bills, like the other annexation bills and all the rest of these, if they haven't had a hearing, if they don't have a hearing scheduled now, they're probably not moving.
Right. If you haven't had a hearing in any committee by the end of next week, that's a milestone, which I can send around to you guys too, what that means. It doesn't mean you can't advance. I think there's some loopholes there for member bills and things like that. But it would mean a lot of bills are dead. So that's why you're kind of seeing a push. And you may see some bills that are scheduled for hearings this week and next week that actually are just getting that hearing so they can stay alive, but may not have a ton of actual support. So,
That's what we got.
with that,
Thank you, Kelly.
thank you. You're very welcome. All right, so I'm going to do the diesel. I'm going to send the diesel letter back.
Yes.
Okay.
Was I supposed to do anything else? Was there anything? Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
That's it.
Okay. So, I believe that's that. I have my script here. Residents who are interested in helping inform others in the community about the harms caused by illegal fireworks are invited to a public brainstorming session on Tuesday, March 26th at 6 p.m. at the Public Safety Building. Learn more about 2 types of middle housing, including accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and cottage clusters, and let us know how they should be incorporated into the city. An open house on the subject will be held Wednesday, April 3rd from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Public Safety Building. Portland General Electric and the city will celebrate the official opening of PGE's Electric Avenue charging stations at the corner of McLaughlin and Jackson Street on Saturday, April 3rd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The event will include demonstrations on how to charge an electric vehicle using the stations, free electric vehicle test drives and rides, food carts, and brief remarks from the project partners. Join us on Thursday, April 18th at 6 p.m. for a comprehensive plan housing town hall at the Portland Waldorf School. This important discussion will include housing goals, needs, and priorities. Join the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, the city, the Linwood Neighborhood District Association, and hundreds of community members to celebrate the grand opening of Wichita Park on Saturday, April 20th from 12 to 2 p.m. The event includes Earth Day booths and crafts, rec-mobile activities, live music, free barbecue prepared by the Linwood Neighborhood District Association, and a ribbon cutting. Wichita Park is located at Southeast Monroe Street and Southeast 59th Avenue. Should we repeat what we know about the soft opening?
I think we should let Lisa.
Oh,
Let me?
Yeah. You've asked about it more than anyone else.
I'm the one who sarang. Well, I thought we were not supposed to be telling people, but okay. Watch, if you want to go to Wichita Park, you should be able to do that starting Friday, actually. So watch for the fence to come down this Friday and go check out Wichita Park. Unfortunately, the rain comes back on Saturday, but so the timing's not great. But anyway, it is spring. It's officially spring tomorrow. Yay! And so you can check out Wichita Park ahead of the official opening.
The Friends of Leading Library, whose mission is to support the library through volunteer services, fundraising, and sharing of information that will benefit the community, invites you to support their efforts throughout the year. Please save the date for their annual library plant sale that will take place this year on Saturday, May 11th and Sunday, May 12th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day at Milwaukie Floral and Garden located on Lake Road. If you're interested in volunteering or donating plants, please call 503-786-7580 or send an email to leadingfriends.plantsale@gmail.com. Learn about all the opportunities to support this wonderful group of volunteers by visiting their webpage located at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov/library. For information about each of the events mentioned, please visit the city's homepage at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov.
I don't think I have anything else.
Are you waiting?
Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
I'm going to have to start drinking coffee in the